I know I will never forget what I saw that day. For me, that day started like any typical Tuesday in our pediatric clinic. Moms calling for coughs, boogers, sports physicals, right before the summer rush. School was out in 2 days. Then summer camps would guarantee some grazes and ankle sprains, injuries that could be patched up and fixed with a Mickey Mouse sticker as a reward. Then at 12:30, business as usual stopped, and with it, my heart. A colleague from a San Antonio trauma center texted me and said, "Why are pediatric surgeons and anesthesiologists on call for a mass shooting in Uvalde?" I raced to the hospital to find parents outside yelling children's names in desperation and sobbing as they begged for any news related to their child. Those mothers' cries I will never get out of my head. As I entered the chaos of the ER, the first casualty I came across was Mia Cerrillo. She was sitting in the hallway. Her face was still clearly in shock, but her whole body was shaking from the adrenaline coursing through it. The white Lilo and Stitch shirt that she wore was covered in blood, and her shoulder was bleeding from a shrapnel injury. Sweet Mia, I've known her my whole life. As a baby, she survived major liver surgeries against all odds. And once again, she's here as a survivor, inspiring us with her story today and her bravery. When I saw Mia sitting there, I remembered having seen her parents outside. So after quickly examining 2 other patients of mine in the hallway with minor injuries, I raced outside to let them know that Mia was alive. I wasn't ready for their next urgent and desperate question. Where's Elena? Elena is Mia's 8-year-old sister, who was also at Rob at the time of the shooting. I had heard from some of the nurses that there were 2 dead children who had been moved to the surgical area of the hospital. As I made my way there, I prayed that I wouldn't find her. I didn't find Elena. But what I did find was something no prayer will ever relieve. 2 children whose bodies had been pulverized by bullets fired at them, decapitated, whose flesh had been ripped apart, that the only clue as their identities was a blood-splattered cartoon clothes still clinging to them, clinging for life and finding none. I could only hope these 2 bodies were a tragic exception to the list of survivors. But as I waited there with my fellow Uvalde doctors, nurses, first responders, hospital staff, for other casualties we hope to save, they never arrived. All that remained was the bodies of 17 more children and the 2 teachers who cared for them, who dedicated their careers to nurturing and respecting the awesome potential of every single one, just as we doctors do. I'll tell you why I became a pediatrician, because I knew that children were the best patients. They accept the situation as it's explained to them. You don't have to coax them into changing their lifestyle in order to get better or please them to modify their behavior as we do with adults. No matter how hard you try to help an adult, their path to healing is always determined by how willing they are to take action. Adults are stubborn. We're resistant to change, even when the change will make things better for ourselves, but especially when we think we're immune to the fallout. Why else would there have been such little progress made in Congress to stop gun violence? Innocent children all over the country today are dead because laws and policy allows people to buy weapons before they're legally old enough to even buy a pack of beer. They're dead because restrictions have been allowed to lapse. They're dead because there are no rules about where guns are kept, because no one is paying attention to who is buying them. The thing I can't figure out is whether our politicians are failing us out of stubbornness, passivity, or both. I said before that as grown-ups, we have a convenient habit of remembering the good and forgetting the bad. Never more so than when it comes to our guns. Once the blood is rinsed away from the bodies of our loved ones and scrubbed off the floors of the schools and the supermarkets and churches, the carnage from each scene is erased from our collective conscience, and we return again to nostalgia. To the rose-tinted view of our Second Amendment as a perfect instrument of American life, no matter how many lives are lost. I chose to be a pediatrician. I chose to take care of children. Keeping them safe from collective diseases, I can do. Keeping them safe from bacteria and brittle bones, I can do. But making sure our children are safe from guns, that's the job of our politicians and leaders. In this case, you are the doctors, and our country is the patient. We are lying on the operating table, riddled with bullets like the children of Robb Elementary and so many other schools. We are bleeding out and you are not there. My oath as a doctor means that I signed up to save lives. I do my job. And I guess it turns out that I am here to beg.
Jessica, please, please. We will.
Thank you. We will now play the video from Mia.
And then she got a deal. And then she went to go lock the door, and he was in the hall. And they made eye contact.
For the gods and for your tribe.
Go hide. And then we went to go hide behind the teacher's desk and behind the backpack. And then he shot the little window. And then he moved to the other classroom. And then he moved. There's a door between our classrooms. And he moved to there and shot my teacher and told me she drinking already. He shot me in the head. And then he shot some of my classmates and the whiteboard.
No sweat.
When I went to the backpacks, he shot my friend that was next to me, and I thought he was gonna come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and I put it all over me. And
What did you do when you put the blood on yourself?
just stay quiet, and then I got my teacher's phone and called 911.
What did you tell 911?
I told her that we need help and to send the police in the classroom.
If there was something that you want people to know about that day and about you, right? Or things that you want different, what would it be?
To have security.
Do you feel safe at school? Why not?
Because I don't want it to happen.
And you think it's going to happen again?
Maria, you're now recognized.
Hello today. I come because I got enough by baby girl. She's not the same little girl that I used to play with, hang around with, and do everything because she was daddy's little girl. I had 5 kids, and she's the middle child.
Brother,
I don't know what to
help
do because
me.
I think I would have lost my
Lots
baby girl.
of bugs everywhere.
My girl
I
is
run
the
from
worst,
them
not only
and
once, but
stuck
twice.
here.
She came back to us.
Brother, I will die here. Let me die like
She's
a real
everything,
Yotun
not only
warrior.
for me, but her
In
siblings
fight.
and her mother. I think y'all could let me be here and speak out,
It hurts.
but I wish something would
Not
change.
like this.
Not only
No
for our
death like
kids,
this. No, he got it
but
for
every
me.
single kid in the world who are not safe anymore. Something needs to really change. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and I understand you are now leaving. We thank you for sharing your story. Thank you, and Mr. and Mrs. Rubio, you are now recognized for your testimony.
I am Kimberly Rubio. This is Felix Rubio. We're the parents of Alexandria Anaya, best known as Lexi Rubio, and 5 other children, who all attended Uvalde Public Schools during the 2021-2022 school year. Melissa, who completed high school this year. Isaiah, who attends Uvalde High School. David, Morales Junior High. Jalila, Flores Elementary. And our 2 youngest children, Julian 8 and Lexi 10, who were at Robb Elementary. On the morning of May 24th, 2022, I dropped Lexi and Julian off at school a little after 7 a.m. My husband and I returned to the campus at 8 a.m. for Julian's award ceremony and again at 10:30 a.m. for Lexi's award ceremony. Lexi received the Good Citizen Award and was also recognized for receiving all A's. At the conclusion of the ceremony, we took photos with her before asking her to pose for a picture with her teacher, Mr. Reyes. That photo, her last photo ever, was taken at approximately 10:54 a.m. To celebrate, we promised to get her ice cream that evening. We told her we loved her and we would pick her up after school. I can still see her walking with us toward the exit. In the reel that keeps scrolling across my memories, she turns her head and smiles back at us to acknowledge my promise. And then we left. I left my daughter at that school, and that decision will haunt me for the rest of my life. Afterward, Felix dropped me off at my office, the Uvalde Leader News, and returned home because it was a rare day off for him between normal shifts and security gigs he takes to help make ends meet. I got situated at my desk and began writing about a new business in town when the news office started hearing commotion on the police scanner, a shooting on Diaz Street near Robb Elementary. It wasn't long before we received word from my son's teacher that they were safe, secure in the classroom. Once evacuated from campus, the children were reunited with parents and guardians at the Civic Center. My dad picked up Julian from the Civic Center and took him to my grandmother's house. One of our Robb kids was safe. We focused on finding Lexi. Bus after bus arrived, but she wasn't on board. We heard there were children at the local hospital, so we drove over to provide her description. She wasn't there. My dad drove an hour and a half to San Antonio to check with the university hospital. At this point, some part of me must have realized that she was gone. In the midst of chaos, I had the urge to return to Robb. We didn't have our car at this point, and traffic was everywhere. So I ran barefoot with my flimsy sandals in my hand. I ran a mile to the school, my husband with me. We sat outside for a while before it became clear we wouldn't receive an answer from law enforcement on scene. San Antonio firefighter eventually gave us a ride back to the Civic Center, where the district was asking all families who had not been reunited with their children to gather. Soon after, we received the news that our daughter was among the 19 students and 2 teachers that died as a result of gun violence. We don't want you to think of Lexi as just a number. She was intelligent, compassionate, and athletic. She was quiet, shy unless she had a point to make. She knew she was right, she so often was. Stood her ground. She was firm, direct, voice unwavering. So today, we stand for Lexi, and as her voice, we demand action. We seek a ban on assault rifles and high-capacity magazines. We understand that for some reason, to some people, to people with money, to people who fund political campaigns, that guns are more important than children. So at this moment, we ask for progress. We seek to raise the age to purchase these weapons from 18 to 21 years of age. We seek red flag laws, stronger background checks. We also want to repeal gun manufacturers' liability immunity. We've all seen glimpses of who Lexi was, but I also want to tell you a little bit about who she wasn't yet. If given the opportunity, Lexi would have made a positive change in this world. She wanted to attend St. Mary's University in San Francisco, Texas, on a softball scholarship. She wanted to major in math and go on to attend law school. That opportunity was taken from her. She was taken from us. I'm a reporter, a student, a mom, a runner. I've read to my children since they were in the womb. My husband is a law enforcement officer, an Iraq war veteran, He loves fishing and our babies. Somewhere out there, there's a mom listening to our testimony, thinking I can't even imagine their pain, not knowing that our reality will one day be hers, unless we act now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Hughes, you are now recognized for your testimony.
Honorable Chairwoman Maloney, Ranking Member Homer, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here today to address the violence in our country. My name is Lucretia Hughes Klukin. I have 4 children and 9 grandchildren. On the night of April the 2nd, 2016, my family got a phone call that would change our lives forever. My ex-husband answered the phone and let out a blood-curdling scream, a scream of pain from the depths of his soul. He screamed, he cried, he's gone, he is gone. Our 19-year-old son, Emmanuel, went to a party early that night. After we got the call, we were frantic. We called his phone, no one answered. We called even the police. I went to Facebook and I had to ask, is my son dead? I found out that he was shot point blank in the head and killed while playing dominoes. No one spoke up for weeks, and the killer was on the run. No one was going to snitch, but that is the street life. Words can't describe how hard it is to bury a child. I ache for anyone and all who have done the same. My son's death was a result of a criminal with an evil heart and a justice system failing to hold him accountable for the laws he had already broken. You see, a convicted felon killed my son with an illegally obtained gun. Our gun control lobbyists and politicians claim that their policies will save lives and reduce violence. Well, those policies did not save my son. The laws being discussed are already implemented in cities across this country. We have decades of evidence proving they do not work. St. Louis, New York, Chicago, Washington, Atlanta are gun control utopias, and they are plagued with the most violence. 10 more laws, 20 more laws, 1,000 more won't make what has already illegal more wrong or stop criminals from committing these crimes. And y'all are delusional if you think it's gonna keep us safe. I am a walking testimony of how the criminal justice system and the gun control laws, which is steeped in racism, by the way, have failed the Black community. By the age of 25, I had already went to 18 young Black men killed at the age of 25. I have 1 Black man in jail, 1 Black man in the grave, and my young grandson gonna be raised without a father. And it's a curse on the Black community and everyone else's. Something has to change. Thoughts and prayers and calls for more gun control isn't enough. How about letting me defend myself from evil? You don't think that I'm capable and trustworthy to handle a firearm? You don't think that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to people that look like me? Who and you who would call for more gun control are the same ones that are calling to defund the police. Who is supposed to protect us? We must prepare to be our own first responders to protect ourselves and our loved ones. I am a legal, law-abiding citizen, and I don't need the government to save me. I teach people how to use a firearm. I empower others to look at me to understand the Second Amendment is their right. I am a proud member of the DC Project, Women for Gun Rights. We believe that education is the key to safety, not ineffective legislation. We support meaningful solutions that will actually save lives. We support the Safe Student Act, H.R. 7415, which would immediately make schools safer. In hindsight of Parkland, we saw failure of the government at every level failing the students. Students saw something and they said something, and the school did not act. Police were called to his residence over 30 times, and they did not act. And finally, the police did not go into their school that fateful day and failed to protect those kids. We need to secure our schools, and we gotta secure this building, or like y'all do. What's the difference? We call on Congress to ban gun-free zones, fund nonpartisan firearm education programs like Kids Safe Foundation and non-governmental mental health organizations like Hold My Guns. And in closing, I claim that nothing in these bills do anything to make us safer or address the mental health crisis in this country. Despite living with the heartache of losing my son on a daily basis, I believe it is our God-given right to defend ourselves from any act of violence. Making it more difficult or even more expensive for me and people that look like me and other law-abiding citizens will not make us safer. It will embolden the criminals. Gun owners are not the enemy, and these gun control policies are not the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your powerful and meaningful and gut-wrenching testimony. We will now pause. You are excused, and we will pause while we seat the next panel. Here to
I just want to say one thing here. With all that last lady said, she didn't offer up a single solution. Because everything she's fighting for arming citizens and more education and blah, 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 she's also the party of let's get rid of the mental health crisis aid that we have in this country. We don't need that. Let's just turn our schools into prisons and arm them and put them in, you know, razor-wired fenced buildings so they can get used to what it's like in the future when the government tells you how to run your life. That's what she's pushing for. And she's completely oblivious to it because of the pain and anger that she feels for everything that she's gone through. Unfortunately, she doesn't realize that it's not the anger that empowers you, but it's love, it's forgiveness. When you can truly see the pain of other people and why they act the way they do, and you see where they're heading if they don't change things, it's much worse for them. So they think they're victims now. They're not even victims. And when I say they're not, I'm not talking about their past. I'm not talking about their previous experiences. Obviously, yeah, they're victims in that sense. But what they don't realize is violence doesn't end violence. Only love can overcome. But that doesn't mean that we need to sit back idly as politicians lie to us and do what they want. But we do need to hold them accountable. There is accountability that needs to be held. I just don't know how to go about that. I used to think that I was the arbiter of that kind of thing. It was taught to me over and over again in Sunday school and in church, indoctrinated in me. You're the judge of good and evil. No, we're not the judge of good and evil. We can point things out. We can show people a different way. But in the end, we're not the judge. We're just witnesses of ourselves. Because on that day of judgment, if you believe in an afterlife, God's not going to your mom, your dad, your spouse, your brother, sister, friends, cousins, and saying, hey, how is this person an RL? What did he do with his life? How would you judge him? No, that's not it at all. That's where so many get it wrong. They believe and they perceive it that way because they've been taught that, because those that are in authority exert their authority over others. And it says Jesus spoke of authority and with authority. It wasn't that kind of authority. It's all the opposite of everything they've been teaching for so long. Or at least living what they preach. But like going back and really listening to the words of Jesus, woe to you, for it'll be more tolerable in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah than in the day of judgment for you. These are the people that, or 5 armor. Yeah, let's do that, and then we can make it dark. Oh, fuck, let's just make it fire. Alright, yeah, good enough for me. Alright, I'm gonna pause myself and continue on, because I really do believe this is important. Whether anyone sees this or not, I just need to know for myself that I spoke out against it, that I was somebody that did something in the limited capacity I have with what I have.
Meeting will resume. We are now ready for our second panel, and I'd like to introduce our witnesses. The first witness is the Honorable Eric Adams, who is the mayor of the City of New York. Then we will hear from Greg Jackson, who is the Executive Director of the Community Justice Action Fund. Next, we will hear from Becky Pringle, who is the President of the National Education Association. Next, we will hear from Joseph Rumalia, who is the police commissioner of Buffalo, New York. Then we will hear from Nick Suplina, who is the senior vice president for law and policy at Everytown for gun safety. Finally, we'll hear from Amy Swearer, who is the legal fellow at the Edwin Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies and the Heritage Foundation. The witnesses will be unmuted so that we may swear them in. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Without objection, your written statements will be made part of the record. With that, Mayor Adams, you are now recognized for your testimony. Thank you for coming. Turn on your mic.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Madam Chairwoman Maloney, for the invitation to testify today. I also want to thank all the members of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, members from the New York City Congressional Delegation, and everyone who has testified today, especially those who have so bravely shared their stories of losing loved ones to gun violence. I was particularly touched by hearing the husband and wife that lost their baby girl. As a father with one son, it was extremely impactful to all of us. I am Eric Adams, and I am honored to appear before you today as the 110th mayor of the great city of New York to discuss the ways we can protect public safety and prevent gun violence. Ladies and gentlemen, it is high noon in America. Time for every one of us to decide where we stand on the issue of gun violence. Time to decide if it's more important to protect the profits of gun manufacturers or the lives of our children. Time to decide if we are going to be a nation of laws or confederation of chaos. And we must do it now. It's high noon in America, our country, the country I love. The clock is ticking every day, every minute towards another hour of death. I'm here today to ask every one of you and everyone in this Congress to stand with all of us to end gun violence and protect the lives of Americans. We are facing a crisis that is killing more Americans than war. A crisis that is now the #1 cause of death for our young people. A crisis that is flooding our cities with illegal guns faster than we can take them off the street. The New York City Police Department has taken over 3,000 illegal guns off our streets this year alone. But the guns just keep coming. This is a crisis that transcends party lines and affects both rural and urban communities. I know this firsthand as the co-chair of Everytown's nonpartisan coalition on Mayors Against Illegal Guns. No matter what our party affiliations, we are united in our mission to stop crime, save lives, and bring an end to gun violence. Because this isn't about blue versus red, this is about right versus wrong. Whether it is on the street wearing a badge or in these chambers taking a vote, we must stand for what is right. First, we need Congress to take the handcuffs off the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, known as ATF, and let them do their job. That means confirming President Biden's nominee as soon as possible. We must work together to dam all the rivers that lead to the sea of violence. Common sense gun reform must become the law of the land. I'm pleased that today the House will vote on H.R. 7910, the Protecting Our Kids Act, and I urge swift passage of the gun violence prevention package for consideration in the Senate. I also urge the Senate to pass H.R. 8, the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2021, and H.R. 1446, the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2021. These are bipartisan gun safety bills that will make our cities and our people safer. I stand with President Joe Biden and calling on Congress to act now to regulate or ban assault weapons in this country. Even if we only raise the age required to buy one of these weapons, lives will be saved. We need Congress to direct federal aid to localities and states to support not just law enforcement and violence prevention, but also access to high-quality health care, child care, education, and housing. We must build a society while youth on a path to fulfillment, not a road to ruin. As mayor, my greatest responsibility is protecting the lives and the safety of the people of New York City. This is my calling, my duty, and my life's work. I did it as a police officer, in a uniform and wearing a badge, and I do it now as the elected leader of our largest American city. But I need your help to further protect our people and to save lives. Time is act now. It's high noon in America.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, you're now recognized for your testimony. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Chairwoman Maloney, Ranking Member Comer, and the rest of the committee for inviting me on this really important topic. My name is Greg Jackson. I'm the Executive Director for the Community Justice Action Fund, the only national gun violence advocacy organization led by a survivor of color. But I'm not here by choice. I'm here by circumstance. In 2013, just miles from this chamber, I was shot at as a bystander while I was simply walking home. And when I arrived at the hospital, I wasn't welcomed with nurses and surgeons. No, I was met with investigators that questioned me as a suspect first and a patient second. I spent 21 days in the hospital, 6 months learning how to walk again. But what was most terrifying and tragic was that when I turned on the TV, I was watching members of Congress have the same debates that we're having right now. That was 9 years ago. Every year, over 110,000 people are shot or killed by gun violence. So that means nearly 1 million lives have been directly devastated since I laid in that hospital, looked up at that television, and watched the members of this chamber debate this topic. Most of the stories of those who've been impacted by gun violence, like mine, will never make the headlines. You know, just 2 miles from here, Micaiah Wilson was shot 10 years old while going to get ice cream. Karan Brown, one of my mentees, who hosted his own Stop the Violence event in his neighborhood, was shot down that same summer and killed in front of a McDonald's. And Pamela Thomas, here in DC, who was so afraid of gun violence in her community that she wrote her own eulogy just to be shot by a stray bullet in front of her son. These stats are not stats, these are stories of real people. Real people that are dying in our streets every single day. Every day, 110 Americans are killed with guns, and 200 are shot or wounded. And we've talked a lot about this being the #1 cause of death for all youth, surpassing car accidents, drug overdoses, and COVID-19. But amid this pandemic, we've also seen a 35% increase in homicides, and this still remains the #1 cause of death for Black men, the #2 cause of death for Latino women, and the #2 cause of death for Black women. We are here because we cannot and must not hide from the hard truth. Gun violence is destroying communities around the country, and every day families experience firsthand the devastation gunfire brings. To eliminate gun violence, we must swiftly recognize that this is a public health crisis that deserves a public health response. At Community Justice, we address gun violence by focusing on those who have been most impacted by the crisis. And we urge Congress to invest in community-based solutions that we know can address those public health risk factors, that can reduce the risk factors of those impacted by gun violence, but also address the root causes. But we also strongly urge that any supply-side approach not only focus on the shooter, but on the supplier and the source of firearms that are flooding into our communities. In moments of crisis, Congress has proven to be as resilient as the American people and take action. When coronavirus struck our country, Congress authorized bipartisan legislation to provide resources and regulations to save lives. When Ukraine was in crisis, Congress sprang into action and mobilized bipartisan authorization to authorize immediate aid, economic investments, mental health resources, and other services to support those communities. But I'm here to say that we are in crisis in America today. Each time, we did the hard thing because it was the right thing to do. And this crisis is no different. This crisis now has taken away grandparents in Buffalo, elementary kids in Uvalde, fathers in Chicago, mothers in Atlanta, nephews in Chicago, even pastors in Charleston. And we're here still asking for action. There are three direct things that we know can be done. First, we must acknowledge this as a public health crisis and craft policies to combat it as such. Second, we must advance common sense legislation that not only addresses the hardware, but promotes community-based solutions to end gun violence, such as the Break the Cycle of Violence Act. And lastly, I urge you to create a select committee on the gun violence crisis to investigate the health impact of gun violence and its disproportionate impact on Black and brown communities across the country. Now is the time to take action before another person loses their life, before another child opens his last textbook, before another parent hugs that child for the last time, and also before someone like me isn't alive and asks you to do so. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Mr. Bong, you are now recognized for your testimony.
I appreciate the opportunity to offer testimony on behalf of the 3 million members of the National Education Association and all devoted educators who teach and nurture and protect our students. As a teacher with 3 decades of experience, I am frustrated, I am heartbroken, I am angry that this is where we are 23 years after Columbine. On April 20th, 1999, I had been a middle school science teacher in Pennsylvania for 23 years. No experience or training had prepared me for the questions my middle-level learners asked me. As I joined my fellow teachers in shock and disbelief of the carnage that ended the lives of 12 students and 1 teacher, the only thing that comforted us was the belief that this society would never let it happen again. But the list continued to grow, didn't it? Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and now Robb Elementary. Kids were celebrating at the end of a successful school year. For 19 children and 2 teachers, it would be the last days of their lives. These massacres occurring in suburban, urban, and rural schools are not isolated incidents. Tallying up the number of killed or wounded children does not begin to tell the full horrific story. Camille, a student who survived Sandy Hook, experienced severe panic for years. She is one of the more than 311,000 students exposed to gun violence since Columbine. Their trauma will likely endure for the rest of their lives. Students across our country are writing goodbye notes and wills just in case. Unfortunately, their fear is perfectly rational. Here in America, we are 25 times more likely to die by gun than people in other developed nations. So the question we must ask, is this who we are? Is it? Our country has already experienced nearly 240 mass shootings in 2022 alone. But that number does not begin to capture the scope of this epidemic. Every day, gun violence kills 111 people. That means that we can expect 22,255 more deaths by guns this year. Inaction equals acceptance of the unacceptable. And this crisis is worse in Black and Latino communities, where 78% of adults or their loved ones are victims of gun violence. The evidence is clear. Where there are more guns, more people are killed by guns. Every single day, the politicians who fail to take action ignore the majority of Americans who want stricter gun laws. You tell our children protecting them matters less than protecting the status quo. A high school teacher in Arlington, Texas, survived a workplace shooting in a corporate setting, only to experience school shootings himself and countless lockdowns. He is now leaving our profession with these words: as much as I love teaching, I can't fully represent and protect my students. I am not going to be the educator they need. Enough with so-called solutions that do not address the problem. We cannot place enough armed guards at every school building in America to protect our babies. We cannot ask educators to carry weapons and wear body armor while teaching and nurturing our students. Because by the time someone has shown up with a military weapon, it is already too late. We need for our students more resources, not more revolvers. You can help us to not only heal, but to hope. Pass common sense gun control legislation so that not one more community is shattered and not one more anguished parents, like we heard today, has to lay a precious child to rest. Our children deserve the chance to grow and to thrive, to live into their brilliance. Thank you for what I know you will do for our babies.
Thank you. Commissioner Gramaglia, you are now recognized.
Chairwoman Maloney, Ranking Member Comer, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's hearing. I appear before you today as the Police Commissioner in Buffalo, New York. It is also my privilege to testify on behalf of the Major City Chiefs Association. We're here today to discuss gun violence epidemic plaguing our nation. This hearing comes in the aftermath of multiple mass shootings that have devastated communities throughout the country, including my home city in Buffalo. Our communities are hurting, and we must continue to support them, the loved ones of the victims, and our brave first responders. On May 14th, 2022, an 18-year-old white supremacist invaded our city and inflicted terror on the Black community in a way never seen in Buffalo's history. He legally purchased a military-style weapon and body armor and then spent months practicing his shooting skills. He entered the Tops supermarket and opened fire on civilians, striking 13 and killing 10. He live-streamed this with a GoPro he had affixed to his helmet. Retired Buffalo police officer Aaron Salter Jr., who I posthumously promoted to lieutenant and issued the department's highest honor, the Medal of Honor, was working top security that day. Aaron was helping an elderly shopper leave with her groceries when the shooting began. He did his best to warn customers while in a completely defensive position. He engaged the shooter as he entered, hitting him with at least one shot. It is often said that a good guy with a gun will stop a bad guy with a gun. Aaron was the good guy and was no match for what he went up against. A legal AR-15 with multiple high-capacity magazines. He had no chance. Assault weapons like the AR-15 are known for three things: how many rounds they fire, the speed at which they fire those rounds, and body count. This radicalized 18-year-old adult should have never been able to have access to the weapons he used to perpetrate this attack, and the laws need to be enacted to ensure it never happens again. Buffalo police officers responded to Tops and were able to take the shooter into custody within minutes. I have no doubt in my mind that their swift response time and handling of the situation saved lives. I would like to publicly thank them and the rest of the Buffalo Police Department for the heroism they showed on that day. Buffalo is known as a city of good neighbors. We are a resilient, culturally diverse community. We came together after this horrific tragedy, and we will continue to heal together. However, no city should have to go through this. And it is time to make changes to a system that is leaving blood on the sidewalks of our communities every day. In 2018, the MCCA adopted a firearms violence policy that would help mitigate the threat of gun violence without infringing on the constitutional rights or weakening due process. These reforms include requiring universal background checks, strengthening NICS definitions, and improving access to records, supporting the use of extreme risk protection orders, aggressively prosecuting straw purchasers and prohibited possessors, and banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Polling shows the majority of Americans support these common-sense reforms, and Congress must act immediately to close the loopholes in our current system and the gaps that allow easy access to military-style weapons. Events like the Buffalo Massacre, the shooting in Uvalde that took 21 lives, including 19 children, and the mass shootings in Laguna Woods and Tulsa are the situations that capture headlines. However, we must remember that gun violence epidemic extends well beyond these events. The grim reality is that shootings have become a daily occurrence in America's cities. Emerging trends like ghost guns and guns modified with switches continue to pose a challenge for law enforcement. Congress must update our laws to account for these new threats and carnage that has accompanied them. It will be nearly impossible to address the gun violence epidemic without first addressing the underlying violent crime problem. Unfortunately, the proactive policing that helps drive down violent crime has become a luxury for many departments. Law enforcement needs additional resources to bolster its response to violent crime. An overall lack of accountability for violent offenders is contributing to rising gun violence. In some major cities, DAs are not prosecuting serial firearm offenders, and judges continue to release offenders on low or no bond. To address these challenges, Congress must provide resources for U.S. attorneys' offices to support additional federal prosecutions as appropriate. Police chiefs see the horror of gun violence every day. Members of Congress share our solemn duty to protect the public. The MCCA will continue to call on elected representatives to eschew politics and take the necessary steps to address the gun violence epidemic. Your leadership is needed now more than ever. Thank you.
Mr. Suplina, you are now recognized for your testimony. You want to turn on your mic, please?
Good morning, Chairwoman Maloney, Ranking Member Comer, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. My name is Nick Suplina. I am Senior Vice President for Law and Policy at Everytown for Gun Safety. We're the largest gun violence prevention organization in the country. I'm honored to be here today and grateful for the spotlight you're shining on America's gun violence crisis. Once again, we are grieving. Frequent public mass shootings terrorize the country and are a uniquely American problem. Mass shootings often focus the public's attention and our grief, and with good reason, but they represent a small fraction of all gun deaths in this country, which include other homicides, suicides, and unintentional shootings. Every single day, some 110 Americans are killed with a gun, and 200 more are physically wounded. We estimate that 1/2 of all Americans have been touched by gun violence, either directly or someone they care for. In other words, we are a nation of gun violence survivors. To be clear, this burden is not being borne equally. I'm talking about our children. Guns are now the leading cause of death for children and teens. I'm talking about people of color. Black Americans experience 10 times the homicides of their white counterparts. Clearly, we're in the middle of a serious public health crisis, one that is crying out for sensible gun policy solutions, especially at the federal level. And while gun deaths are hitting all-time highs, the gun industry is breaking profit records year after year. The gun industry uses fear to sell guns, and it believes that mass shootings are great for gun sales. They are making money on these tragedies right now. So when we talk about the shootings in Uvalde and Buffalo, when we talk about the toll of gun violence on our children, when we talk about the disproportionate impact on Black Americans, when we talk about how gun violence costs taxpayers, survivors, families, employers, and communities $280 billion a year, we need to also talk about how the $9 billion civilian firearms industry is shielded from the scrutiny and accountability that has led other industries to better and safer practices. The gun industry, for its part, has innovated not to make guns or us safer, but to make them more dangerous, more likely to evade regulation, more profitable. Instead of designing firearms that can't be fired if stolen or that make it easy for law enforcement to trace, gun makers have created modifications to mimic automatic fire. They've created impossible to trace ghost guns that help circumvent background checks. And they've designed AR-15s that can be modified in minutes to bypass a state's assault weapons law, as we saw in Buffalo. And now, in a crowded field, gun manufacturers are trying to market in increasingly brazen ways, often touting the deadliness of products, glorifying combat, and attempting to appeal to younger and younger audiences. Finally, let's not forget the industry has done almost nothing to take steps to prevent diversion of guns into the criminal market and to gun traffickers. Between 2016 and 2020, over 1 million of the industry's firearms were recovered by law enforcement in connection to crimes. More and more of these guns carry the telltale signs that they were purchased with the intent to traffic or illegally use them. Yet the industry is rarely held accountable. This committee's investigation found a dealer in Georgia where 10% of the guns it sold ended up on crime scenes, 10%. And we wonder why it's so easy for criminals to get guns. So why is no one holding the gun industry accountable for its dangerous practices? In 2005, at the behest of the NRA, Congress passed the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which insulates the industry from most legal threats. And again, at the behest of the NRA, Congress passed the TR Amendment, a budget rider that purports to limit sharing of data about guns used in crimes, which keeps the industry out of the conversation about how criminals get armed. These laws have to go. In spite of these barriers, I'm heartened that public and private actors in legislatures, city halls, courts across the country are taking action to reveal the gun industry's role in gun violence, and I'm grateful to this committee's investigation into gun trafficking and its recent letters to gun manufacturers. I hope you have the CEOs of here, because America hears every day from the families who have lost loved ones to gun violence, and our country deserves to hear from the CEOs who are profiting off that.
Thank you. And Mrs. Claire, you are now recognized for your testimony. We still can't hear you. Turn your mic on.
Wait!
Pull it closer too.
A trap!
It's not on.
Members of Congress. My name is Amy Swearer. I'm a legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, where my scholarship focuses on the Second Amendment and gun violence prevention. I've testified before various legislatures after several mass shootings, Parkland, Beach, El Paso, unfortunately, too many others. And I hope to God this is the last time I ever have to testify before a legislative body after a mass shooting. I fear that it won't be. And I fear that it won't be because the conversation has become predictable. An unspeakably horrific event like Uvalde or Buffalo happened, reflexively, almost compulsively, come calls for Congress to pass a whole host of gun control measures, largely targeting peaceful law-abiding citizens. Should anyone dare question the constitutionality, practicality, or effectiveness of any of these policies, their opposition is immediately framed as callous obstructionism, and their legitimate concerns are brushed aside as, and I quote, bullshit. Any viable alternatives are deemed frivolous without so much as a passing thought to their usefulness. So I will once again run through all of the problems with serious problems with commonly proposed gun control measures, called three. Semi-automatic rifles are the type of firearm least often used to commit actual gun violence. Pistol grips and barrel shrouds don't make them any more or less deadly in the context of mass shootings. While these features can and do make a difference in the context of lawful self-defense for civilians, which is why millions of peaceable Americans own them. Standard
It's
capacity
true!
magazines are by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. The few rigorous studies on their prohibition have found that the evidence for their success at lowering rates of gun violence is inconclusive at best.
It's true!
In which mass public shootings occur,
Ready
renders
to kick
magazine limits
asses?
effectively useless at saving lives. 18 to 20-year-olds are legal adults otherwise endowed with all of the rights and duties of citizenship, including the right to keep and bear arms. Even if it were constitutionally appropriate to punish the mass of responsible young adults for a handful of them committed atrocities, the vast majority of mass public shooters are 21 and older. And then I'll repeat the same viable alternatives that would be far more effective, in a far more immediate way, again detailed in the written submission that I hope you read.
It's
Take violent crimes
true!
seriously under existing federal laws and encourage your state and local counterparts to do the same. Authorize schools to shift the over $100 billion in unused COVID relief funds, the physical security improvements, the hiring of armed police staff, and the hiring of licensed mental health professionals. Promote responsible gun ownership without simultaneously imposing financial burdens on gun owners or hindering their ability to immediately respond to violent threats. Invest in the nation's mental health infrastructure to combat the 2/3 of gun deaths that are suicides. The list goes on. Congressman, I am fully aware that when you are burying a child, nuanced policy discussions are over. It doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter to a fourth grader hiding under her desk, covering herself in her dead classmate's blood, whether the real problem here is a feral crowd or the several dozen missed opportunities to intervene along the way. But it should matter to you.
It's fucking true.
Making public policy decisions. Many of you are the ones implying that a lot of victims would be alive today but for a mass shooter's pistol grip and a background check that he already passed. Many of you are the same ones mocking
It's
anybody for
fucking true.
doors, when a single locked door in Uvalde would likely have saved 21 lives, and when all of us just walked
Fuck yeah.
into this building with its limited
Fuck you,
public
Ted
access
Cruz.
points,
Fuck you, Greg Abbott.
one-way locking security.
You know what? We need to hold our senators accountable. It's true.
What happened in Uvalde
This is sickening.
is horrific. It is horrifying. No one should ever have to experience that type
I'm
of
not attacking them personally.
And
I am attacking them on the basis of their
everybody with a soul has it shattered over acts like this. And we have seen
their morale,
every
their
single
moral.
one from Columbine to
Neither one of them are men of moral.
not somehow
They are the opposite of everything they preach.
we did not go numb somewhere along the way to the reality of this. It's not as though our family members don't also teach fourth graders, or we don't also send our kids to school. It's not as though we don't also shop at grocery stores, or go to country music festivals, or work in hospitals.
It's true.
We don't also feel the tremendous global weight of the tragedy from the we oppose these policies precisely because the lives of these victims matter. Because the grief of their loved ones is real. Because we all want thriving communities where families are flourishing, burying their children. The opposition has always been and is still a genuine concern that these policies suffer from serious constitutional and practical defects, that they will not have the impact we promise people they will. And we have always proposed alternatives that would be more effective and less constitutional.
Because it's always easier to not deal with facing yourself in the mirror. So much easier to revert blame and other things rather than face the true issue and have to make personal change.
Express the grief and outrage I feel and others feel as we listen to the stories from our witnesses today. No child should be cut down by a gun. Lexi Rubio should have been able to grow up, live her dreams, become a lawyer, major in math, visit Australia. 11-year-old Mia should not have been forced to cower in fear as she watched her teachers and friends massacred. And the close-knit, vibrant Jefferson Avenue community, many of whom came today to stand with us, should not be forced to reckon with the deaths, friends, and gunned down by a racist. We are in a crisis, but we are not powerless. Congress just needs to find the courage to act, and I hope we find it today when we pass these sensible, vote on these sensible gun reform bills. Let's start with assault weapons. The shooters in Uvalde and Buffalo were too young to buy alcohol, but they were both purchased assault weapons legally. Ms. Pringle, as an educator, your organization represents millions of teachers, some of whom have witnessed horrific gun violence, some of whom have been murdered, and its aftermath. Would banning assault weapons save the lives of teachers and students?
Yes.
There are many other common sense steps that we can take. We can strengthen back.
You got, let me,
age to buy a gun.
those that are so pro Second Amendment are huge anti-marijuana. They have marijuana as the highest fucking punishment of any drug out there, because they quote-unquote think that making marijuana illegal works, even though they lie consistently about it. Just equate that to guns. Why don't they equate it to guns, if that's truly what they believe?
240% increase in what's called ghost guns. If we don't have a combined effort with the intervention items we're putting in place, the prevention, and also stop the flow. Many of the guns that we're witnessing are purchased or stolen from outside our state. One gun in particular, the suspect was found
It's
with
true.
a gun.
How are you going to keep things out of an area when everyone else has it legalized? So, like, say for Texas, all states around us, including the country below us, that's also attached, all have legalized marijuana. Texas has not. Why? But we're defending the right to kill children in schools, apparently. By the way, our gun laws are.
And deaths from guns. And as you can see in this chart, the American people overwhelmingly support gun safety reform. So, Mr. Suplina, in your view, why has Congress failed to adopt these common sense measures that most Americans and most countries in the world...
It's because of the money in politicians' pockets. Why did we ever allow bribes?
Gun lobby presents a formidable obstacle in this country. Oftentimes, and you've heard it already today, the Second Amendment is used as a reason to not advance common sense gun reforms, even while the court has not said that the very reforms that you're proposing would violate. Quite the opposite, the courts have upheld over and over and over again. So the lobby what it sees as its job to make every gun law one step closer to confiscation, which is a lie. Conspiracies abound about the government coming to take your guns.
It's easier than the truth to believe.
Lawmakers who are afraid that people will believe that those myths are true. They're not true. We can do an awful lot to save American lives.
We have lost too many lives to gun violence. It's long past time Congress act.
Thank you, Chairwoman and Ranking Member for this hearing today, so we can highlight the need for additional school security to protect our children. I join the nation in mourning for the 19 children and 2 adults who senselessly lost their lives due to an evil act committed about 2 weeks ago. While every loss of life is a tragedy, no one should weaponize or politicize the abhorrent acts to punish law-abiding citizens. For almost 250 years since the founding of our nation, countless hundreds of thousands of men and women have sacrificed their lives to provide the freedoms we enjoy today. Indeed, those freedoms were bought at a very high price and must be guarded continuously so they can be passed on to future generations. We allow emotion to drive our actions that have constitution-altering consequences. We will destroy the very foundation of our country and break faith with those who gave everything that we would be free.
Because apparently guns and the profits of the manufacturers being able to bribe our politicians is more important than our own children's lives. This is disgusting. This is truly disgusting.
I believe it was mostly preventable. We don't know all the facts yet because the investigation is still ongoing, but I hope that this hearing is truly looking for legitimate, functional, and effective answers, and not just a bunch of left-wing talking points to fill the do something, do anything mentality that I have heard coming from the Biden administration. The White House press secretary, John Pierre, said on Tuesday, May 31st, that President Biden is uninterested in pursuing tighter security of schools in the aftermath of the Uvalde tragedy. And I quote,
Why do we want to turn our schools into prisons?
That is not something that he believes in, said Jean Pierre. One of the things I've learned during my 3 overseas tours of military combat was that the harder the target you are.
Yes, because we want to treat our children as if they're in the military, because that's what we want them prepared for, right? Right.
Just shows how seriously out of touch the Democrat leadership is with reality. You know, I want to echo Mrs. Hughes' remarks from the previous panel. Schools should be hard targets. Violent criminals should never, ever have been able to gain access to the inside of these schools. That means schools across the nation should implement sensible security measures, like keeping doors locked, a single point of entry, better security technology, and a volunteer force of well-trained and armed staff, in addition to a school resource officer. And where a school staff person has additional responsibility, they should receive additional compensation. A retired military officer from my district, an Army colonel, sent me an email a few days ago, and I want to read a short section of it, and I quote, "I'm absolutely convinced that the single most effective method to eliminate school shootings is to take away all the signs that declare all schools are gun-free zones, and do away with all laws that require such postings."
Yeah, because... Oh my gosh.
We love our children and will do anything to protect them. Accordingly, selected teachers
This makes me sick.
protect our children. Proceed at your own peril. You will be stopped.
Yes, there are some teachers that want this, but overall, teachers don't want to be armed security guards. They're there to teach children. It's a school.
They believe they will be unopposed. From June 1950 through June 2019, 94% of mass shootings occurred in gun-free zones.
Just listen to him. He's talking. If you look at the statistics, I'm not even talking to the majority of my audience. Everybody agrees. 87%. It's 13% of people either don't agree or don't have an opinion on it. This is what one party represents in the U.S. on this topic. 13%. These are the people that tell you the election was stolen and that it's two-sided, that there's only two sides.
To survive an encounter with someone who is bent on harming them.
This is unfortunate. I feel bad for my daughter and for her generation, for the shit that they are gonna have to go through.
There's a lot of insight in the words of the Army Colonel.
I liked the
He
other
also
one
knows
more.
the difference between a hard target and a soft, easy target. And he knows the advantage of that
Let's
difference.
smash things.
Ms. Ware,
So what's his solution? We've listened to him say over and over again that guns aren't the issue. What's his solution?
What you believe should be done to secure our schools from violent criminals to ensure that our students have a safe place to learn?
There are several avenues taken, including physical security improvements. Again, it becomes popular to lock people outdoors and those sorts of things. But these are basic security components of the rest of our everyday lives. Apartment complexes, just the building we walked into today.
And who's going to fund it? Definitely not the people that are, you know, taking money from gun corporations, is it? No.
I think schools should have the flexibility to decide how that happens. If you look in my written submission footnote, there are.
I'm not even talking against. It's common sense. Yes, we want locks on doors. You know, like basic security. The same security you have at your fucking house. Why don't we have that at the school? Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. That's not what these people are. You guys don't even want to fund that. Teachers have to go out and buy their own books, have to buy their own supplies. Students are required to buy their own supplies because these people don't want to fund it. But they have no problem taking money from the NRA after a school shooting. Not even flinched, not even bothered by it. They're not even bothered. It's sad. There's such a place in hell for people like that.
I also want to thank the previous panel, the families of
Greg Abbott may enter the next life without his legs, but I guarantee you he'll be feeling those legs with the pain of the flames of hell if he doesn't change his ways. The same with Ted Cruz. It's unfortunate that, like, Ted Cruz's kids are drawn into this. Because even they speak against him at their young ages. But just like it says, in the end days, brother will be against brother, father against son, mother against son, father against daughter, daughter against mother. You know, the whole thing. The whole family against each other. It's true. All in the same household.
Quote this report, if the key gun control proposals now being considered in Congress had been law since 1999, 4 gunmen younger than 21 would have been blocked from legally buying the rifles they used in mass shootings. At least 4 other assailants would have been subject to a required background check instead of slipping through a loophole. 10 others might have been unable to steal their weapons because of the efforts required to encourage safer gun storage.
Well, those 10 others, it's making excuses for each one of them. It's like, oh, well, you find a leak, you plug it up.
Might have changed the course of at least 35 of those 106 mass shootings. A third of such episodes in the United States since the massacre at Columbine.
Yeah, we've had 200 fucking mass shootings this year alone. But you don't even want to address those.
446 Americans.
Why don't you want to address those, huh?
References made to the fact that someone could cause damage with a hammer or a knife. I would wonder if you could talk about AR-15 style firearms and ammunition and how different they are and the greater vulnerability it creates in society. I know you've written on this in the past. Go over that for a bit, just to educate people who are not familiar with that type of weapon.
So this type of weapon, which is derived from a military weapon, presents increased risk, as I believe the commissioner said earlier, because of their speed of bullet, their handling, their ability to accept high-capacity magazines.
But it's not the bump stock, it's not the fucking pistol grip. I'm not saying take everything away by any means. Don't get me wrong.
Damage that is done to the human body when you use one of these. A handgun, even at a sometimes larger caliber.
You don't get to own machine guns. You don't get to own fucking grenades. Huge explosive devices. You don't get to make a nuclear reactor in your backyard.
Rifle with multiple rounds can do. So these are unique threats. There's a reason why they are used in mass shootings, because those shooters.
But these are also the same people that agree that drinking and driving is okay.
A quote from a trauma surgeon at the University of Arizona who agrees with your assessment. He said that the damage for an AR-15 on the body, quote, it looks like a grenade went off in there. Madam Chair, I am so sorrowful for the loss of Lexi Rubio and so many others, and so many we've heard in previous mass shootings. That I will support the package of restrictions that we will consider in the next couple of days here in Congress to restrict the use of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, and I'll vote for the background checks that I think are necessary. And I respect my colleagues' rights to defend the Second Amendment. But I will note when in defending the Second Amendment, you have to go to military experts and battlefield commanders for advice on how to protect our kids while they're in school. We got a problem.
Exactly.
Think about that you're going to military battlefield commanders, combat veterans, for advice on how to protect our kids while they're sitting in school.
While they're learning.
I just urge my colleagues to think hard on this and consider supporting the tax bill that we have before the Congress. Thank you, and I yield back.
Yields back. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions, is now recognized.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much, and I want to thank the gentleman from Kentucky, the ranking member, for really what I think is a thoughtful opportunity for us to handle what is a difficult circumstance. I'm a Texan. I was about some 100 miles from Uvalde. I know Uvalde very well. I spent a good bit of time in San Antonio growing up. As soon as I heard about what happened, I immediately went about convening some 10 counties worth of superintendents, mayors, county judges, law enforcement people, sheriffs, deputy sheriffs, school resource officers. I did not sit back and wait to find out what this hearing might develop. I did not wait to find out what someone else thinks is a good idea. I tend to think that back home, people have the best answers. I say it differently. I think Texans have answers for Texas problems. Madam Chairman, I do not want to chastise anybody today. I want to thank each of our people who showed up, not only from Buffalo, but from New York City and others who have taken time to be here today. I do not wish to challenge anyone, but Madam Chairman, I would like to enter into the record an article from the Christian Science Monitor Weekly, June 11, also an article which I have provided to you.
Thank goodness, thoughts and prayers. Oh man, I was just afraid that we weren't going to get thoughts and prayers.
538 article said, we've known how to prevent a school shooting for more than 20 years.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In fact, as I went about looking at this, which I had not previously, I did a good bit of review myself, and I found out that there is the National Center for School Safety. It's at the University of Michigan, the School of Public Health. And they state this before and still, and I quote, the information that we do have access to, these studies seem to be saying that yes, by developing a positive school climate, by educating students on how to say something and speak up or find a trusted adult, is having a positive effect, not just on attitudes, but
It didn't work in Florida. It didn't work anywhere else.
as we talk about behavior. We learned at
What do you do when the people in authority are corrupt?
that this is not a decision that
Wake up, Texas. These are the people that you are putting into office.
effort
These are the people that are taking money from gun lobbyists and are defending the guns. They don't care about your kids, people. If they did, they wouldn't be doing this. They care about their pockets. They care about their power. That is all they care about. It's disgusting. It's evil. It's a sin.
Of mental health issues. I go to schools probably every 2 weeks, and my observations that I've publicly stated are that I have seen our schools, there are a lot of children, a lot of young adults who are tested in ways where I think they're reaching out for help. I think one of the things that we should go to is looking at these studies that have been out here, and I would hope our schools and our experts that are on these panels today, including you, Chief, including you, Mayor, would
Yes, let's just keep looking at the studies. Let's not worry about the actual issues. Let's just keep looking back at it. Yeah, let's just keep looking at it. Let's not do anything. Just like they said the other day, we plan to do nothing. Republicans are doing nothing at the moment.
And I know we've heard testimony that everything about America is racist, but I think that in our classrooms, we need to talk about our nations, our rights and our responsibilities, but taking time every day to be nice to each other.
Yeah, that's what it is. You guys, thoughts and prayers. This is what we need. Thoughts and prayers. Let's not actually get rid of any guns. Let's not enact any laws. Let's not do anything. Let's just take time every day to look at each other and look your neighbor in the eye at school and say, you know what, you're dressed really nice today. And that's how we're gonna continue. That's how we're going to fix everything, right? Get out of fucking town. And that's why this is so hard to walk that line, you guys. This guy is clearly a liar, is clearly in the pocket of fucking, ooh shit, is clearly in the pocket of gun lobbyists. Listen to him. Yeah, if we just take a moment to just be nice to each other every day, just one moment. We don't need to pass any gun laws or anything like that. We just need to be nice to each other, you guys. That's it. Just be nice.
Thank you for your service to the people of Buffalo. I was born in India and I immigrated first to Buffalo.
And it's like, how do you not get angry with that? How do you represent the love of Christ with somebody lying so blatantly? That is so clearly evil.
What's called a Daniel Defense DDM V7 rifle. It's a style of AR-15 rifle. It markets that rifle as, quote, a perfect rifle for everybody. This particular picture comes from their Twitter account on May 16, 2022.
But you have to love them because
guns are the leading cause of death among young people.
with as frustrated and as angry as we are,
Guns kill far more
I can understand.
but we don't let cigarette companies market to children.
It's true.
You don't think it's appropriate for Daniel to
Okay, I'm gonna stop talking while he talks because I like what this guy has to say.
AR-15 style rifles or handguns or any other weapons to children, correct?
I think that picture behind you is very disturbing, is what it is. No, I don't believe that should be the case.
And why do you find that picture disturbing?
Children in our country, because of the lack of safe storage on weapons, have either accidentally taken their own lives or somebody else in that household or another friend in that house who was there visiting. It's disturbing.
Shortly after the Daniel Defense Rifle was used in the Uvalde shooting, this picture was taken down from their Twitter account, and indeed their Twitter account was made private. I think they had second thoughts about advertising in this manner as well. Ms. Swearer, in 2019, while testifying before the House Judiciary Committee, you went viral in a viral video talking about the lethality of AR-15s. You said, quote, your mother struggled to hit a stationary target from 6 yards out under ideal conditions, and then she picked up an AR-15, and I watched my mother put a fist-sized grouping of lead in the center mass of the target 20 yards out. When accuracy and stopping power matter, they are simply better. You said that, correct, Ms. Swear?
Yes, I did.
This is a picture of the 19 children and 2 teachers who died in Uvalde, Ms. Swear. You mentioned the AR-15 stopping power, but I gotta believe these little children were not the ones you were talking about stopping, correct?
No, I was talking about stopping the individual who showed up to shoot them.
And the
individual that individual was a bunch of law enforcement officers with an AR-15.
and Miss Swear, your mic's not on.
The green light is on.
I can hear you, Miss Swear. It's good. I can hear Miss Swear.
Perhaps you could switch with Mr. Sapolina for a minute if his mic is working.
Can you please restore?
The witness needs to be heard.
Restore the time, please.
Thank you.
Congressman.
Can I repeat the question, then you can say the answer?
Yeah, and if we could just stop the clock for a minute, because we lost some time. I think the clock was due.
Reptile going to war.
Mr. Krishnamurti, do you want to repeat the question?
Yes. This is where, when you talked about the stopping power of these AR-15s, it wasn't these children that you were talking about stopping, obviously.
No, I was referring to individuals like the one who went into that building and spent 78 minutes shooting them, and I hope, as was the case in Uvalde, that the people who show up to stop shooters like that have the AR-15 precisely for its stopping power, and that is exactly what happened in Uvalde.
And this case is where this man legally purchased his AR-15 rifle, correct? And in this particular case, the shooter had legally purchased his AR-15 rifle and was able to stop and obviously end these lives forever. Now, Commissioner Gramaglia, I want to address you again, Commissioner. You know, guns are often billed as essential to maintaining the freedoms we enjoy in America. They are an iconic part of America to a lot of people, but cars have long been central to American life as well. And what we've seen is that here's a picture of traffic deaths versus deaths from firearms. And at one time, traffic deaths far exceeded firearms in 1950. But over time, traffic deaths have gone down, while firearm deaths have remained relatively constant. Now, of course, with regard to the right to bear arms, that's in the Constitution. But it's not an absolute right. That's why we outlaw machine guns and we regulate firearms in other ways. Sir, with regard to traffic deaths in cars, the imposition of rules and regulations and laws, along with private industry adopting safer ways to drive and devices to make them safer, have led to a reduction in traffic deaths. But the same cannot be said for firearms. Isn't that right?
Looking at the traffic deaths going down, regulations both in vehicle safety, airbags, speed enforcement, other things of that nature, that led to safety measures.
It's true!
To firearms. Some sensible regulations to limit the carnage that's happening on our streets.
It's true!
Thank you. Gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, is recognized for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The horrific and heartbreaking tragedies that occurred in Uvalde and Buffalo have shaken the nation. We're all made in God's image, and I continue to pray for our society and for the families of men and women and children who were senselessly murdered. We must be thoughtful in how we discuss and address this issue. When the federal government acts in haste, the room for error is exponentially compounded. This problem should be diagnosed in its entirety before we endeavor to place proposals on the
how long? I mean, It's been how long since 20 some years since Columbine? How old is this lady? How many mass shootings has she seen in her life? And how often has she seen them increase over her short lifetime, right? I mean, she's got to be, what, in her 80s? But she's just going to ignore the fact that they just keep getting more and more popular and greater because we're moving too quickly in 20 some years.
I now yield the balance of my time.
Again,
who has a tremendous experience with these.
very simple statistics with guns versus cars is fucking phenomenal. Like, I don't see how you can argue against that. That's pretty there.
In your sworn testimony, you say of retired Buffalo police officer Aaron Salter Jr., his service weapon was no match to military-style weapons and armor. It was equipped with. Yet your Buffalo police officers responded to cops a minute after receiving the 911 call and were able to take the shooter into custody within a minute of arriving at the scene. That's impressive. That's very impressive that your officers were able to do that. And this gentleman armed with an AR-15 style rifle. What is the Buffalo officer's standard service weapon?
A Glock 40 caliber.
A Glock 40 caliber pistol. So they responded with a Glock 40 caliber pistol and were able to do this.
It's true!
They were able to do that because as he exited the store, he had the AR-15 pointed up underneath his chin, and then through what I thought was very calm de-escalation language, he surrendered his weapon and put it down. Had he pointed at the officers, we think we would have a different response.
Okay, but that 40 caliber weapon is completely capable of stopping someone with an AR-15, correct?
Well, he had military-style body armor and a tactical helmet on. He was shot at least one time that we uncovered through our evidence, and that had no effect on him. I also watched the video, both the store surveillance video that has not been released and the GoPro video that was downloaded, which shows the confrontation between.
But the 40 caliber pistol that the officers carry is plenty enough to stop an armed shooter, correct? It's all about shot placement, isn't it?
It is and it isn't.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Mrs. Swear, actually, have mass shootings or school shootings been carried out with other weapons other than AR-15? Okay. What other weapons? And what's the primary weapon?
So the primary weapon, as your plurality are handguns alone. Another sort of larger segment are several variations of firearms, a combination of rifles and shotguns, and the smaller percentage are rifles.
Okay. Thank you very much. So handguns are still very, very good firearms. Madam Chairwoman, I would like to introduce this article into the record, and I request unanimous consent. It's a Fox News article May 28, 2022, and it's entitled "West Virginia Woman with Pistol Shoots Kills Man at Graduation Party, Saves Several Lives."
Without objection.
All right, thank you. You know, what happened in Uvalde was an incredible tragedy, and it had a very terrible ending. But something very similar happened the very next day, that Wednesday, in Charleston, West Virginia. And a particular woman in West Virginia fatally shot a man who had begun firing an AR-15 rifle into a crowd of dozens. The woman was attending a West Virginia party. She drew her pistol and fired on the convicted felon. No one at the party was injured.
She didn't need an AR-15.
Obtained his weapon illegally. Criminals will obtain their weapons however they want. They will get them illegally. More gun laws are not going to stop that. Not in any way, shape, or form, because criminals simply do not obey the law.
Gentleman's Madam,
I yield back.
I'd like to ask you to insert into the record an article, "Why Do Something Won't Work," from the Wall Street Journal, Thursday, June 2nd, 2022. Thank you.
Without objection.
The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley, is now recognized.
I thank the chair and our witnesses for being here today. I was the chairman of Fairfax County when the Virginia Tech massacre occurred. At that point in American history, that was the worst gun massacre in our history. I buried 6 young children, students, that week.
Take a look around.
I'm still in touch with many of the families. And the emptiness in their hearts, souls, cannot be filled. It is a tragedy that lives with them forever. Those children were killed by a mentally ill person who should not have had access to weapons, but did. He wasn't a criminal. He was mentally ill.
Inhale.
We hear excuse after excuse that gun laws don't work. The Australian experience would suggest otherwise. After a series of massacres in that country, Australia adopted some strict gun laws. They don't have the massacres we do. It changed behavior because it changed access to weapons and ammunition. We've heard the answer is
Down in
arm
the
our
Durnar, there was a
teachers.
secret den with the hidden
That would be
treasure
the
guarded by the vile creature.
Miss Pringle.
The greedy monster was keeping an eye on the treasure day
that be a good
and
solution
night,
from your
not
point of view?
allowing anyone to get closer. But one day, brave Jotun appeared, eager for glory and fame. He attacked the beast, killed it, and took its treasure. But not for himself. He took the treasure to offer it to the gods and to his tribe.
Over 23 years. I just want you to imagine, I was a middle school teacher. My responsibility was to ensure that every student was nurtured and that they could learn, come to school ready to learn every day. And now the suggestion that I, as a teacher, would be responsible for carrying a weapon and making a split moment decision about whether I was going to shoot someone or not, whether that responsibility would be mine to bear, that is a distraction from what we know we need to do in this country, which is to pass comprehensive gun control laws, something we have never done. In the short time that we did ban assault weapons, we saw that carnage go down, didn't we? Yes, we did.
It's true!
Never passed comprehensive gun legislation in this country.
Thank you.
To do it now.
Mayor Adams, welcome. Mayor Adams, you're the mayor of, I think, the largest city in the United States.
Yes.
Would it be a good idea from your point of view as the mayor of that city and your commitment to reducing crime in that city to arm our teachers in all of your schools in New York City? Would that be a solution from your point of view?
No, and I think the facts show that. Between 1996 to 2010, one study found that police officers were 3 times more likely to die from gun violence with a heavy flow of guns in their city. So it's harmful to the law enforcement community, it's harmful to our civilians, and it's harmful to our children.
Mr. Gramagilia, Police Commissioner, would arming teachers help your force? Would it have made a difference in your community in Buffalo?
I think what we have to be careful on is to not militarize our schools and make students feel like they are in a system where they are surrounded by
A military state?
weapons in an institution where they're supposed to be learning. I certainly agree with hardening our targets, making sure our schools are safe buildings, having a strong school resource program where school resource officers are engaging with their students, are building trust within their students. But I think we have to caution against over-weaponizing our schools. it causes fear in our students, and I think we need to engage our students in these conversations.
And just real quickly, and Ms. Pringle's point, the use of weapons and the decision to use them for law enforcement can be a split-second judgment, and that requires careful training, does it not?
It's a considerable amount of training for absolute split-second decisions that are second-guessed for years on.
Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Heiss, is recognized for 5 minutes. Mr. Heiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the record, from what I can research and understand, there are some 300,000 or so crimes committed every year, violent crimes in which guns are a part of the situation. There are between 500,000 and 3 million incidences a year where guns prevent violent crimes from taking place. So let's clarify here, the issue is not gun violence.
Let's not
the issue. We have a
get it construed that you're using the fact that every police encounter is in that statistic, asshole.
And the answer to this situation,
That's not a statistics on fucking the regular public. That's on police. When you take statistics like that and lie about things, it's really easy to disprove that stuff.
the answer is not releasing criminals into our streets or allowing them into our country. The answer is
Nobody's talking about these things. These are all distractions that Republicans are using to throw off their voters from looking at the fact that their pockets are lined by gun lobbyists.
In this country, we've got to recognize that there is great value in upholding the rule of law. We've got to recognize
There's even greater value in being an honest person.
not the least of which is respecting one another.
None of this is moral absolutes, and tomorrow I think we're going to see where the Republican Party has been for the last few years when it comes to moral absolutes. And unfortunately, it's going to make the Christians look very bad, because they're the ones most associated with Christianity, unfortunately. And they try to separate. Just within Christianity, there's so much segregation and separation. It's sickening. It all needs to end. Just fucking love one another, you guys.
Country where we have limited government and maximum freedom if we do not have a citizenry that is capable of self-governing their own lives with an authentic understanding of right and wrong. And so for us to take out of the equation any mention of moral absolutes or the role that our founders mentioned and described as indispensable supports to our system of government, which is morality, religion, and morality, then I believe we're making a mistake in all of this discussion. These things cannot be ignored. Mayor Adams, let me real quickly begin with you, and if we can go quickly. New York City is certainly one of the leading examples of gun restrictions and gun restrictive measures in the United States. Yes or no? Your mic was off.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
And yet, we all know New York has continued in recent years to see a rise in crime. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. In January of this year, you released in a press statement regarding your blueprint to end gun violence in New York City. You had in that a quote that says this: "It is illegal to carry a gun in our city, yet police officers take them off the streets every day in record numbers." You made that statement correct?
Yes, and many comes from Georgia.
Right. And so here we still have, in a city that has the greatest among the greatest gun restriction laws in the country, a rise in crime and guns being carried off the streets in record numbers every day. It doesn't appear that the attempts that are produced by the gun restrictions are having any effect of keeping bad people from getting guns and taking the constitutional rights away from American citizens
only helps criminals, is I guess what I'm getting to. Ms. Swearer, let me come to you. If we continue down this path of restricting gun rights from American citizens, making it easier for criminals to have targets, knowing that there will not be guns by legal citizens there to defend themselves, what kind of impact will that have in the long run? Can we put a pause?
Use your neighbor's mic. Use your neighbor's mic. Maybe that'll work better.
My apologies, I was told the issue had been taken care of. Congressman, to answer your question, criminals are rational actors. You look at the studies on this and the way in which criminals operate. Obviously, they don't want to confront someone with a firearm any more than we wouldn't want to if we were criminals. They're rational actors. You mentioned the statistics on defensive gun uses. I think that is important to point out. I would also note how much lower that it is, considering there are a number of states that essentially do not allow ordinary law-abiding citizens to protect themselves with firearms in public and or who make it far more difficult for individuals to keep and bear arms even inside their own homes, and so that could be considerably higher under different circumstances. That said, again, I appreciate you pointing that out, but again, criminals are rational actors, and otherwise is borderline silly. So of course,
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you. Thank you.
The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Buffalo, Uvalde, Sandy Hook, Tree of Life, Mother Emanuel Church, El Paso, Walmart, Pulse Nightclub, Las Vegas, Columbine, the bloodbath continue. In the history of our species, a number of civilizations have practiced or allowed human sacrifice, including the sacrifice of children. The Carthaginians, the Mesopotamians, the Incas, the Aztecs. Will we be recorded as such a society that accepts the sacrifice of innocence? Gun violence is the #1 cause of death of children in the United States of America today, which makes us globally unique. We have rates of gun violence and gun death 20 times higher than other industrialized nations like France, the United Kingdom, Israel, Norway, Sweden, Japan. No other nation comes close to what we see here, even though we have comparable levels of mental health problems and mental illness. Will we continue to accept the slaughter of innocents, including innocent children, as acceptable collateral damage for loyalty to a completely bogus and distorted misreading of the Second Amendment and what the Supreme Court has said about it? Justice Scalia in the Heller decision was emphatic that reasonable gun safety regulation is perfectly consistent with the Second Amendment rights. Justice Scalia said he specifically rejected the view advanced by a number of our colleagues today, saying that the right of gun ownership is not unlimited. No, Justice Scalia stated the Second Amendment right is, quote, not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever, in any manner whatsoever, and for whatever purpose. He enumerated a partial list of reasonable regulations, including a ban on carrying concealed weapons, the possession of firearms by felons, the mentally ill, and other dangerous people, laws forbidding the carrying of firearms into schools and government buildings and other public places, laws imposing the conditions and qualifications on the sale of firearms, such as background checks. All of these things, he said, are perfectly consistent with the Second Amendment right. It's not different from other rights we have, like the First Amendment, where you have an absolute right to speak, but you don't have a right to set up a demonstration with loudspeaker system in front of the White House at 2 o'clock in the morning and keep the president's family up. We accept reasonable time, place, manner regulations with respect to all rights. Now, our colleagues invite us to believe the Second Amendment is some kind of policy straitjacket, but they won't read or quote the decision by Justice Scalia himself, who wrote the most elaborate defense and explication of the majority's view of the Second Amendment in DC versus Heller in 2008. Mr. Suplina, in 2005, Congress gave the gun industry unprecedented and unique immunity from civil lawsuits for crimes committed with their products. No other industry's got anything like that. Could you explain what that immunity protection means for the gun industry and how it has blocked common sense laws to end gun violence?
Yes, Congressman, thank you. The law of PLACA, which you cite, has given near blanket immunity to the gun industry, and the result has really had a profound impact on what we know about the gun industry's role in gun violence, as well as any accountability for the industry. So acts that would have led to either litigation that would have exposed truths like happened with the tobacco industry, or accountability like happened in the automobile industry, safety practices that would have improved at these manufacturers because there was a risk of doing nothing, just simply does not exist with the gun industry.
Well, what reckless marketing and sales practices has the gun industry engaged in because of this blanket of immunity that has been bestowed upon them?
Well, you know, there are several, and the marketing is getting increasingly reckless, increasingly desperate as the field gets more crowded, but also in terms of distribution practices. I've heard several times today about how easy it is for criminals to get guns, as if that's some act of magic, but these guns are all starting with gun manufacturers and gun sellers. We know that certain gun manufacturers are fueling gun shops that are selling disproportionately into illegal markets. And the gun industry is protected by PLACA because they say, oh, we're following the law. Well, the numbers speak for themselves.
Okay, and then finally, Chief, you were interrupted before. Well, what do you make of this claim that we shouldn't have laws governing, for example, a universal criminal background check because criminals don't follow the law? Is that an argument against having any law against murder, rape, assault, because criminals by definition don't follow the law?
The gentleman's time has expired, but the gentleman may answer.
So the universal background checks is a simple process that's going to have those that want to legally obtain their guns with their constitutional rights to obtain those guns. Criminals absolutely are not going to follow that. But the more guns that we keep flooding in without background checks, without proper adherence to get those guns through straw purchases and other manners, that's how we're flooding the market, so that the criminals can obtain those guns.
And Justice Scalia emphasized that there should be regulations.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you,
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon, is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, we hold hearings on all sorts of topics for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes for political reasons, or even worse, sometimes for political theater aimed at attaining political currency which will then be spent on winning an upcoming election. Other times, hearings are held to actually solve a problem. We're here today because of the tragedies in Buffalo and the horrific loss of life in my home state of Texas, in Uvalde. A beautiful American community ripped apart by a troubled, evil coward. Now, when lives are lost and innocence is stolen, particularly when children are the victims, it's natural to want to assess and focus blame. Who did this and how did this happen? And I'm no different than any American. I'm heartbroken and I'm furious. Those innocent children are gone and the indescribable suffering of the families is beyond. We have a president that says continually that he must do something, we must do something. Many Democrats are echoing that, we must do something. No, we need to do something effective that will keep our children safe. As I mentioned, when a senseless tragedy like this happens, blame's thrown around. Some people want to blame guns. Some people want to blame gun manufacturers. Some people want to blame, believe it or not, the Constitution. Some people want to blame an entire political party. And all this couldn't be more misplaced. The shooter is the only one to blame. So when the president and many Democrats are claiming that guns are the problem and the readily available supply is the culprit, well, the more guns in America, the argument goes, the more dangerous America becomes. But the actual facts belie this thinking. In 1969, so about 50 years ago, there were 180 million firearms in this country. Today, it's about double. In 2019, it was about 365 million. Yet the murder rate back then was 9.6 per 100,000. The murder rate now is 5, or in 2019 anyway, it was 5 per 100,000. So twice the number of guns, and yet murder rate was cut in half. The truth is that guns have always been readily available in this country. But mass shootings, and particularly mass shootings of schools, were non-existent, or at least extremely rare, until they became a grisly recent phenomenon. So what's changed in the last year? There's been a noticeable breakdown of the family, there's been an erosion of faith, and there's been a seismic drop in social interactions, in large measure, due to the overuse of these dang smartphones and the proliferation of social media, which is probably better described as anti-social media. Senseless mass shootings are not committed by well-adjusted, successful, socially polished people. They're committed by disturbed, unstable voters
I'll be
with
looking
mental.
at the end of the year, so we started now.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, can I get my time back?
Yes.
Thank you.
Rule out what we don't want.
Senseless mass shootings are committed by unstable, disturbed loners with mental disease, refusing to address better mental health services, especially for young people, is to do a disservice at best, and it's a dereliction of duty, of course. The focus, sadly, by the Democrats is to restrict guns or prohibit their legal possession entirely. Democratic member of Congress in a committee hearing just recently said, and I quote, "We will not rest until we have taken weapons of war out of circulation in our communities." So, do restrictive gun laws for prohibition. The most dangerous nations on the planet, according to the World Bank and the UN, are El Salvador, Jamaica, Venezuela, and Honduras. What else do they have in common? It's also nearly impossible for an average citizen to own a firearm, and yet they are terribly perilous places to be. Believe it or not, some Democratic-controlled cities in our country with restrictive gun laws are even more dangerous than the aforementioned countries. St. Louis has a higher murder rate than El Salvador. Baltimore does as well, and Detroit is a more lethal and dangerous place to go and visit or live than Venezuela. So does passing prohibition, I mean, it's just simply that doing something doesn't work. Doing something effective is the path that we should and must take. History's shown us when you disarm law-abiding citizens, you create not more safety, but more peril. The inconvenient truth for some on this committee and in this chamber is that more firearms in the hands of law-abiding citizens make us all sick. So let's talk some real solutions. We must harden our schools with controlled access and single point of entry with tiered entry procedures. The main office should be located directly by the front door, which is single access entry. Classroom doors should automatically shut and lock like hotel rooms. Let's support and foster a robust school marshal program where qualified volunteer teachers and staff go through proper training to be armed on campus. Let's increase the number of SROs in our schools. Let's leverage technology by putting cameras in schools, much like Frisco, Texas did 15 years ago when I was on a city council. And they had a command center and a mobile command center. Any threat could be immediately detected, tracked, and eliminated forthwith. We need a rapid response plan and a rapid response force to be trained to world-class standards. And also, law enforcement doctrine must change. So when there is a threat, the schools aren't besieged, but rather our heroes in blue advance, using cone techniques and teamwork and technology, and eliminate the threat as soon as possible. Our goal should be to protect our children. No parent, educator, citizen, legislature, or nation has a higher calling. Let's look at real and effective solutions. Shelve the divisive rhetoric. These American children deserve nothing else. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from California, Mr. O'Connor, is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like so many on this committee and around the country, I was deeply moved, not as a politician, as a father, by the testimony this morning of families of victims. Kimberly Rubio, who lost her precious daughter Lexi, cut through all the talking points, all the debate, and asked the central question before our Congress and our country. As she put it, what do we value more, children or our guns? It's really that simple. I want to talk about the common sense reforms on guns, but as a representative of Silicon Valley, I feel I also have a duty to talk about some of the role of social media in this massacre. With the Uvalde shooter on Instagram having a group chat where there is conversation of school shootings, where there is conversation of threats of violence, where he's bragging about getting assault weapons, Why is there no action? And let's be very clear, these are minors. He was a minor when he did this. It's not the same free speech rights. Mr. Suplina, do you think companies like Instagram should have some responsibility in group chats when minors are involved and you have explicit discussion of school shootings to do something?
I think the role of social media companies is an important one, and you're right to point it out, Congressman. Instagram, Facebook, these are often where we see the earliest warning signs of a potential mass shooter, as well as other social media platforms where these instances are discussed. There's often multiple people in the chat. And I do want to also mention, with respect to the Buffalo shooter, for instance, he cited YouTube for the videos that allowed him to modify.
I just wanted to say real quick that in the 60s and 70s, they also didn't have locks on their doors either, because crime wasn't as prevalent.
Just like my colleague
Hate
Mr. Raskin said,
that is being spread in the violence
Amendment is not absolute. It's important to recognize
has
the right of
grown.
The First Amendment is not absolute. Under Brandenburg, you can't have things that incite violence, and there are greater protections for minors. I mean, it is crazy to me that you can have people under 18 talking about shootings and mass shootings, and these companies are taking no action. So we need to have regulation that gets to the heart of this. You know, Mrs. Swearer, I'm trying to understand your position, and I just want to ask you some simple yes or no questions to understand where you're coming from. Is it your view that someone who has committed a violent felony should be able to purchase a gun, yes or no?
No.
Is it your view that someone who's a serial rapist should be able to purchase a gun, yes or no?
Very clearly, no.
Is it your view that someone who is a drug trafficker should be able to purchase a gun, yes or no?
No, and these are becoming insulting.
And so, well, I mean, so would you support any laws that would make sure that violent felons, serial rapists, or people who are drug traffickers will not get access to guns?
If they are written and narrowly tailored to approach that issue without burdening the rights of law-abiding citizens or criminalizing low-risk transfers between responsible citizens, yes, I'm more than willing to look at that law.
That is exactly what the background checks. I mean, because right now what you have a case is that the background checks do not cover a lot of the sales to violent felons, to serial rapists, and I just want to be clear, when the Republican Party, their position right now by opposing H.R. 8 is they are for violent felons, serial rapists still being able to purchase these guns.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
No, they're not. They're against low-risk transfers
It's
being
my
criminalized.
time. I'm reclaiming my time. This
Point of order, Madam Chair. The position of Republicans is that violent criminals be in jail.
Well, no, the position is...
Madam Chair, the gentleman has not stated a valid point of order.
The position, H.R. 8, all H.R. 8 at its core said, is that violent felons are still getting these guns. Serial rapists are still getting these guns. And the law and order party that has demagogued the issue of law enforcement and policing, that party is saying, we're okay with violent felons still getting these guns. We're okay with serial rapists still getting these guns. And all the Congress on the Democratic side is trying to do is to close those loopholes.
I respectfully refer you to my testimony on this very bill before the Senate Judiciary Committee last year, where I explained how that is a grotesque mischaracterization of our opposition to that bill.
I am saying that there is not...
The gentleman's time has expired.
Well, you kept interrupting me.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Keller, is now recognized.
I would first like to take a moment to thank all our panelists, this panel and the previous panel, for your testimony. We've seen some horrific acts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We saw a devastating shooting in Philadelphia on Saturday, and I continue, and we all should offer prayer for the families across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and across our nation that have been affected by these acts committed by violent criminals, skyrocketing crime in our cities. That's what we need to focus on. New York City saw a 16.2% increase in violent criminals shooting others in March of 2022. That's up from a year before. San Francisco saw a 31% rise in homicides. In Chicago, violent criminals were responsible for shooting 47 people on Memorial Day weekend alone. There's a trend here. Crime is rising in cities that have the most restrictive laws on firearms and have the least severe criminal enforcement penalties on the books. And in fact, cities that don't enforce the laws that are on the books. The district attorney in San Francisco has dismissed over 40% of felony convictions since 2020. And in Philadelphia, homicides have increased 58% during District Attorney Larry Krasner's tenure. However, only 21% of crimes when violent criminals shot another person since 2015 have led to criminal charges, and less than 1/10 of those incidents resulted in convictions. Philadelphia police are making record amounts of arrests for crimes committed by violent people with guns. Yet Krasner's office has dismissed or withdrawn more violent cases every year he has been in office. The bottom line is when you fail to enforce the law and hold criminals accountable, you get criminal behavior. So, Ms. Swearer, how does failure to prosecute past or current crime affect crime rates in the future?
Well, it certainly emboldens criminals and reasonably allows them to believe that there's a very little chance that they will be punished or in any way held accountable for their crimes.
Many of the proposals we're discussing today are widely implemented across the municipalities where crime spikes are happening. Would limiting law-abiding citizens' right to own a firearm curb these disturbing trends?
No, it would not. And I would also point out the reality of violence is not that it's being perpetrated by people who lawfully purchase and possess their firearms. It is largely perpetrated by individuals with long histories of violence who obtain their firearms already through illegal and illegitimate channels that are not addressed by universal background checks because they are already circumventing the law regarding those background checks. It's a very low reward endeavor, even if it's 100% enforceable.
What measures should be taken to ensure victims and their families are not legally ignored in favor of defendants?
I would, again, refer to some of my previous testimonies. I know our time is short. Previous testimony that I've given before the Senate Judiciary Committee on gun violence in Chicago, I think a lot of that is still applicable to your question. From a federal perspective, as I said, I continue to enforce federal laws and hold criminals accountable at a federal level when possible and encourage state and local counterparts, some of whom have done a horrific job of this, to do the same.
So I just have a question. There's called the NICS system. And when you purchase a firearm, as I don't know how many people in this room have ever gone through a background check, but it does ask questions. I know it was brought up earlier about criminals being able to purchase guns. Is it not already illegal for rapists and murderers and people who have done domestic violence and convicted of these things? Isn't it already illegal for them to purchase firearms?
To purchase and to possess, assuming they are felons and have not had their rights restored to them under existing state or federal processes, though there is no process under federal law, so it would just be the same.
Okay, but the point is, it's already, we're not saying that criminals should have laws. We're saying criminals should be put in jail, and law-abiding citizens should be allowed to lawfully possess firearms.
That is certainly what I'm saying, and that is my understanding of what every member who has opposed H.R. 8 is saying as well.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Fume, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. There's an old saying that your pain is where your passion is. So let me just go back to where we started almost 3 hours ago at the beginning of this hearing and talk for a second about the pain that I felt, as I hope many of you did, listening firsthand to the accounts of witnesses and victims from Uvalde and from Buffalo. Listening to them, I am still stunned and heartbroken. The gun carnage that continues in schools, supermarkets, in movie theaters, in churches, on the streets of my Baltimore and the streets of cities all over this country is a cross, ladies and gentlemen, that we all bear, whether we want to or not. The gun laws that we hope will be passed today, I hope, are seen as a beginning, not the end, only as a beginning. Otherwise, I really believe that we are doomed in our fight against murderers and guns and the evil and the pain that they spread. I want to acknowledge and thank the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, the commissioner from Buffalo, and the mayor of New York, all of whom served in law enforcement and saw firsthand how difficult it is to deal with the violence perpetrated by guns, and particularly assault weapons. And I want to associate my remarks with those of Mayor Adams when he said, let the ATF do its job in rounding up so many illegal guns that are on our streets and to finally confirm a nominee. Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, you'll remember 1994. We were members of this body. We worked for a whole year to put together and pass an assault weapons ban. And the only reason it wasn't permanent was because we weren't able to get enough people, members, on the other side of the aisle, unfortunately, to go along with that. And so the compromise was a 10-year ban on assault weapons, which expired in 2004. I'm just shocked that 18 years have gone by and this body has not moved to reestablish that. In 1999, as a president of the NAACP, I filed suit against the gun industry. It took us 3 years to get to court because the NRA did everything they could to keep it from not happening. And finally, in 2003, we went to court. I testified in Brooklyn, New York for over a week, but we didn't have the weight we needed, and the NRA was a bigger force than we could deal with. And so we lost that, but the judge, to his credit, said this does not prohibit the fact that there certainly will be other lawsuits like this. The NRA heard those words and took them to heart and spent the next 18 months putting in place an absolute immunity on the gun industry, and unfortunately was able to get this Congress to pass it and sign into law. It is just unbelievable that we will get absolute immunity to any industry in this country, particularly when there's harm and personal injury. So I think more than anything else, I was stunned a little while ago in hearing the gentleman, my colleague on the other side of the aisle, saying that he had sought out advice from a military commander about how to protect schools, and that the advice was harden the target. And Ms. Ware, when you were asked to comment on that, you said absolutely harden the target. Well, that's fine. Except, how do you harden a supermarket?
It's
how do you
true.
harden a church? How do you find a way to go out and harden movie theaters? If the only answer is hardening the target, we've already capitulated. And I'm telling you, I'm so glad that so many people are focused on this hearing around the country so they can see firsthand what is going on here. We have a problem that is not going to go away. Every year it gets worse. And so
True.
Until we're prepared to do what we were sworn constitutionally to do, to protect this country from enemies, foreign and domestic, we would have failed. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Vermaglia.
Tuna awaits.
Looking at
Are you ready?
Presented statement, sir. Say you support confiscating guns from individuals determined to be a threat to themselves or others. Determined to be. But by this legislation my colleagues are putting forth, my understanding of the letter of that law, which I 1,000% oppose, as would our founding fathers, The letter of that law is an anonymous tip from a citizen. So if this was law, Commissioner, would you confiscate, would you go to your neighbor's home and confiscate his legally owned weapons, a man that was not under criminal investigation nor under arrest? Would you do it?
The red flag laws would...
That's a yes or no, brother. I got 5 minutes to make an hour-and-a-half statement here.
It's more than a yes or no answer.
We'll move on then. If you cannot say yes, you would confiscate weapons from an American citizen that was subject to this law that my colleagues intend to push through this Congress, and you said in your statement that you would confiscate those weapons if an American was determined to be, your quote, a threat to themselves or others, according to that law.
Let's just scare people into like just completely lying to the American public. You know, it'd be nice if our politicians in these same situations had to be as honest, you know, as the witnesses. Because if our politicians had to be as honest as the people they interrogate, investigate, whatever the fuck they want to call this, most of them would be in prison for a very long time. He wants to talk about weapons of war and all this shit. Yeah, this is our schools nowadays. And then you're like, yeah, the best thing to do is just to increase weapons, arm the teachers, no. Why are we escalating when the rest of the world is de-escalating and getting somewhere? Oh, this is where I was like, yeah. They didn't have mass shootings. They didn't have ARs. They didn't have... He starts talking about robots, cereal, or Robux magazines buying them. Motherfucker, you guys didn't have locks on your doors because you weren't worried about people breaking in and shit. But as you guys increased the weapons, so did crimes increase. The hatred and the division that we see today, has it gotten better or worse? Which parties have stayed true to anything that they've said, and who's changed along with the times? I would say there's no right party at all. You know what there is? There's a person that runs everything. Not runs everything. Every one of our presidents, every one of our elected officials is a single person. But when we put those people in there, it's like we're building a machine. And depending on what parts we put into that machine depends on, you know, everything else.
Beginning college in Louisiana, working. To my amazement, you know what I discovered, Madam Chair? You know what these houses did not have that were built 100 years ago in cities in America? You know what they did not have, Commissioner?
Nope. Oh, I guess he did talk about that.
Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? Country where homes were built in cities.
Oh, and this is where... I guess take it. Because all it took was one person to say, hey, you know what? I don't have to listen to what everyone else does. I can do what I want. Ooh.
And here we sit today.
Whoops.
Where our once proud Democratic Party is presenting unbelievably unconstitutional laws.
No, they are not. Oh, it's weak. Damn.
Police commissioner that says he would go home to home and confiscate legally owned weapons.
He did not say that. He did not say that. He is putting words in that officer's mouth. These same people that say that they're pro-police are the ones putting words in their mouth and lying. It disgusts me. Ooh, AOC.
Let's talk facts here. There's a lot of discussion about New York City. There is no discussion about gun violence in New York City without discussing the iron pipeline. That
Amen,
is
preach it.
Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and honorary mention to Ohio, where 70% of likely illegal trafficked guns found in New York City come from.
Oh, yeah.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because
It's
the
true.
fathers and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states.
It is true.
Every week in recent memory, we have had at least one mass shooting.
It's true.
Mr. Pringle, you are the president of the National Education Association. You represent teachers. Between 2009 and 2018, how many school shootings did the United States have? 288. Now let's look globally. Our G7 partners, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom. Combined, how many did those countries?
Oh, I was holding up a 5. You can't see me.
5 times. In 10, almost 10 I've regenerated. 288 versus 5.
Oh, but
This is not.
they have locks on their doors, right? And they have like security guards at every school and razor wire and all that, right?
Nationally embarrassing and delegitimizing to the United States.
Fuck yeah, it is.
Because for all the billions and trillions that this body authorizes in the name of national security, we can't even keep our kids safe from their schools being turned into a war zone.
It's
Now let's
true.
talk about
And it's
why.
not fear mongering, it's true.
More important to lobbyists and the gun industry than children, than houses of faith, than human beings. Let's talk about profit. Mr. Suplina, in 2020, 22.8 million guns were sold, reflecting a 64% increase from 2019, correct?
Correct.
In 1 year. And across the board, gun manufacturers and ammunition companies began to see record profits. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now let's put that into context. In 2020, again, more than 45,000 Americans died by gunfire, reflecting an almost threefold increase from 2015. Are those statistics correct?
That's accurate.
So in your view, are you seeing a correlation between gun profits and gun deaths in the United States?
Yes.
It's true.
Between 2019 and 2021, 2 years, leading gun manufacturers Sturm and Ruger saw gross profits double to almost $280 million. In fact, during an earnings call, their CEO called the sales boom, quote, historic, ferocious, and that the future was bright. A month after that, AR-556 pistol murdered 10 people at a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado. Those profit margins, $280 million.
Control by fear.
Go to lobbying. Is that correct? Much of that goes to lobbying, correct?
Significant amounts go to lobbying.
And can you remind us what the gun industry is lobbying against when it deploys these lobbying resources?
They are lobbying against every law that would regulate firearms.
And can you?
It's true. It's kind of like Trump fighting every lawsuit, everything, just any ask for information with the Russia probe. It's the same thing. It's so easy to look at the gun corporation and like what they're talking about now and look at the Trump organization and say, oh, hey, it's the exact same thing. But they're both guilty.
Temporarily deprive after due process firearms from somebody who's themselves or others that is a core communication.
Thank you very much. And for context, the NRA spent about $250 million in 2020 alone.
That's true.
The entire salary of Congress combined.
Holy shit.
In 1 year, lobbying against gun safety laws. There's also this discussion.
Can you imagine what they're taking home if that's what they're willing to spend?
But yet we aren't doing anything about addressing the actual root causes of misogyny, where 2/3 of mass shootings are connected to domestic violence, or the emergence of white supremacy radicalization, mass incarceration, and poverty, and the connection between that and mass shootings in communities. I yield my time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Young lady's time has expired. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Brugman, is recognized for that.
Thank you very much. In the last couple of weeks, I had a chance to go down to Mexico and it was part of an issue that I wasn't really expecting to hear. But a couple of border patrol guys pointed out to me that firearms were very, very regulated in Mexico. Do a little Google and find out the first 9 in 2019, Mexico was wildly difficult laws and a murder rate 6 times that in the United States. Not 6% more, not 60% more. But assuming he got it right, maybe he was cherry picking the year, I don't know. 6 times as many murders as in the United States. I assume the Mexican officials who put these laws into effect thought to save lives at the time, that they made it so difficult for law-abiding Mexicans to get a hold of a firearm. But obviously the results of their laws was not to make Mexico safer.
But you're part of the group, weren't? I don't know. Maybe he wasn't. Never mind. I was thinking of something.
Rules connected to ownership of guns. We've also, in this country, had a dramatic increase in the number of domestic guns in the last 2 years.
I'm not going to speak on Mexico alone just because I don't know enough about Mexico. I do know this, though, that their schools are safer than our U.S. schools. I mean, if we're breaking it down, let's see if all those murders, what does that come down to? Like, what was the major cause of those? Because I don't think it's any secret that there's like cartels and shit like that. That if that attributes to, say, 90% of that number that you pointed out, then your statement is completely, again, another false flag and bullshit from the Republican Party again.
I'm not overly familiar with any of the underlying causes. I will, to a greater point, say Mexico is, to my awareness, one of the countries with the right to hold and bear arms, which is sort of a misnomer in that country, as you point out. So it's fundamentally different understanding of what that means than in our country. As to, I'm sorry, please remind me of the second half.
Well, the massive increase in murders.
I think it's hard to pin that down to any one simplistic notion of what is causing that. Certainly, problems with policing and calls to defund the police, trust between communities and police members.
Yeah, because look at Uvalde. Like, how does a community come back from that? Like that, I couldn't even imagine. Like, how would you accept anyone that was, quote, serving and protecting you in that community after finding out that they did nothing for over an hour, almost 2 hours? And I'm not saying anything against anyone there. I'm just saying, like, that's got to be difficult for both sides.
Why do you think the president is not open to harden schools this way?
I cannot read the president's mind, but my guess is he would rather focus on other ways of addressing it.
Like an issue that would affect all guns and all gun violence and not just school shootings.
Only care about or only mention one aspect of a greater issue, which is focusing on physical security. Congressman, respectfully don't
It's
know
true.
if you're not here for my opening statement or have not read my written submission, but I respectfully have pointed out roughly a dozen other issues as well. This is comprehensive in nature. It is not one thing or the other. It is both.
I've been here for 3 hours since before the hearing started. I heard your testimony. My reference was to schools, and my reminder was those are
Madam
not
Chair,
the
I
only
think he's
source.
out of
Gentleman
order.
is not recognized.
Witness, address me, Madam Chair.
Could you give me another?
It's true. She did. She wanted to call him out. Yeah, he should be able to defend himself.
Give us if
Because, yeah.
Biden is going to stand between us.
Oh, let's just do that.
Looking rich. Can you give us other ideas that we could use to prevent these tragedies?
Sure. As I mentioned in both my written and oral testimony, I think we can focus very clearly on building up the nation's mental health infrastructure, both specifically in schools and generally across the board.
I'm so tired of hearing these people talk about this health crisis and whatever, mental health crisis, and then defunding everything to do with it. Where's our national health care, huh? If that's what you're still worried about, if that's the true cause of all this gun violence, Republicans, why don't we have national health care, huh? Oh, again, because it's not profiting your pockets from the gun lobbies that you've chosen to side with, rather than our kids or our places of safety. Because when you have money, you can just kind of run from things like that, right? Is that what you believe? You're sorely mistaken. History has a way of repeating itself, and that's why I feel bad for you guys. You guys don't even know. If things don't change, if they keep going this way, ooh.
themselves if that bill was passed. Do you remember your response?
I have a general idea of what I would have said under that circumstance, but no, I don't remember my specific words.
You said, and I quote, "I think worse than that, sir, you will see millions of otherwise law-abiding citizens become felons overnight."
Yes.
Oh, gee. So why'd you change your tunes so soon?
Answer, you read the bill before you came to Congress to testify against it, yes?
If we're referring to the
Yeah.
assault weapons,
What? Whose pockets are you taking your money from, lady? Huh? That's what I'd want to know. Why all of a sudden a 180 switch on that, huh?
Before the bill became law.
No, so that is the case under that bill. The problem is, anytime that is transferred to
Yeah.
anybody
No,
else,
don't sit here and lie.
Please respect the witness at the time
I wish somebody would ask her where she's getting her money from.
answer to my question. I'm not sure what is being asked.
The gentlelady has reclaimed her time.
So you knew that the bill, you said yes in response to my question, that you knew the bill would allow the gun owner to maintain possession of any semi-automatic assault weapon that was lawfully possessed. I swear, I respect that we have different opinions on Representative Cicilline's assault weapons law, but we cannot have different facts. We have a duty to debate the merits
It's
of the
true.
You falsely testified under oath.
Would you like
that
the
bill,
explanation of
no, I will
why I
not.
said
I
that?
have not
Nope.
yet been misled.
You've already lied. You've given some truth, but then
Ask questions. Shouldn't she let
no,
the
she's been
witness
found guilty of lying to Congress. She'd be thrown in jail.
falsely testified under
Madam,
oath.
point of order. Point of order.
There's a gentleman's point.
I've been accused of falsely testifying
She-
under oath, and I would like to discuss it.
The gentlewoman has accused her of perjury.
It's
Are you
true.
going to hold to that, or are you going to allow the witness to respond to that accusation of criminal conduct?
You have not come forward with a point of order.
It's true.
I asked you if that bill was correct, if the bill would allow any gun owner to maintain possession, and you said yes. Yet you testified that the bill would allow people to become felons overnight. Wait! Earlier today, you testified that you hoped that this was the last time you testified before Congress. For the sake of our nation and the integrity of this Congress,
I said
I do
Congress
too.
after a mass shooting, trying to figure out how to solve a problem that we are all heavily invested in solving.
Ms. Swear,
That is-
I have
Madam
not
Chair, point of order,
asked
point of order.
questions. How dare you proclaiming my
No, you lied. You are lying.
state the law.
How dare you
It's true.
You do not even want an answer to.
No.
I'm moving on. I'm a lifelong consumer protection advocate. From 2015 to 2020, there were at least 2,070.
Shut that bitch up!
Those children.
I love it.
A consumer product that causes this much harm to the public would normally be subject to recall. But federal law prohibits the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the agency responsible for protecting the public from dangerous products from regulating guns.
Yeah.
This is absurd. After one child died using a Peloton treadmill last year, the Consumer Product Safety Commission intervened and recalled the product. But when hundreds of children die using guns, there is no federal response. There is
None.
no federal safety standard for guns.
None.
Even though 40,000 Americans hurt or kill themselves or other people in hundreds of accidents every year.
It's true.
Instead of regulating guns like any other consumer product, federal law protects gun manufacturers.
Why aren't they paying for mental health? Why aren't they funding the suicide hotline?
And the gun industry avoids any
They spend all this money on politicians and bribing people like this bitch lying under oath. I can say that because she just got caught lying under oath. She's a fucking liar.
In 2001, a 13-year-old boy named Billy accidentally shot his father's handgun and killed his friend Josh. Billy mistakenly thought the gun was unloaded because he had removed the gun's magazine. Josh's family sued the gun manufacturer for failing to warn Billy and other consumers that their product could be fired without a magazine. It's a simple case. It should have been decided by a jury, as is provided under the Constitution. Instead, because of the gun industry's immunity, the gun manufacturer was able to dismiss the case without a trial. If a pharmaceutical company failed to warn customers about the known risk of one of their drugs, they could face thousands of lawsuits. But we allow the gun industry to sell weapons without taking any precautions to protect
It's true.
children and families from fatal accidents. Mr. Suplina, do you think the gun industry would do more to protect children if Congress ended their immunity?
Absolutely.
Would ending the gun industry's immunity put gun manufacturers out of business?
No, it would not.
Nope.
In the 1990s, lawsuits forced Big Tobacco to pay for the harm they caused by marketing cigarettes.
They're still around.
Last year, Big Pharma paid $26 billion for communities devastated by opioids.
Madam Chair,
Victims of gun violence also deserve their day in court. They deserve justice.
It's true.
Madam Chair, that's parliamentary brief.
Madam Chair, I have point of order. Madam Chair, point of order. Again, Ms. Porter accused our witness of...
She just showed it. It's true.
Madam Chair, the gentleman has not stated a proper point.
I'm stating
That is not a proper point of order.
Nope.
We just had accused a witness of perjury.
Again, you have another Texan lying to the American people. These people have their day in the afterlife, you guys. They do. They have caused so much pain and suffering. They've caused so much division and anger within people. It's hard to not, like, be enraged and wish angry things on these people for what they've done. Oh, fuck me.
Coming out of this as
But it's not to ignore it. It's to call it out.
why we're asking investigations are ongoing. Obviously, some answers, of course, will never, even the conclusions we could come up with will, of course, never answer.
But when somebody shows you who they are, who they really are, believe them. That lady showed that she is a liar and a manipulator, and that she's in it for profits. She's not in it because of the kids. She maybe even want it for the fame. Who knows what she really wants? But it's not the intention she says it is.
Do things out of the best of intent and have a really and a lot of data. There's a lot of data that points to the fact that gun control leads not to more safer communities, but to more dangerous communities.
Oh, does it? How?
One of the proposals out there right now is to raise
No, okay. The proposal.
a rifle. And in our federalist society, we have many states, and so we're able to kind of test these things out. And as far as I know, the only
Okay, I'm waiting for an answer.
study that's been done on that was in the Journal of Law and Economics. Talked about it and looked at it and said, if anything, there was a 6% increase from states who began to.
Oh, you mean from the illegal guns, like when 70% of them are coming from outside the state from legal states?
Continue to put addressing policy perspective. I'd like to bring up a topic that I think needs to be added to this conversation, and Senator Tice and Higgins touched on this quite a bit, because a lot of times here in Congress, we'll measure. Politicians like to get away with measuring our personal compassion. Usually it's...
Okay, so he still has another Republican here who has not given any argument. He has not given us a solution. All he's done is fill space with words.
If we do this, it would be wrong for us, just out of the sake of doing something, to measure our personal compassion by how
Let's not do anything, because it would be a dick measuring contest, is what he's saying.
And it's important to point out
This is sickening.
the federal government takes authority, it's always for altruistic reasons.
Oh, here comes the fear mongering. Oh, watch out. It might be, somebody's gonna take your freedom away or whatever.
And then used nefariously much later.
Who cares about the kids, right? It's not about the safety of the kids. It's about making sure that you get your funding for your campaign, right? Where's all that money coming from?
Into the mix of this, because if there's a common
It's all coming from. Oh, I don't want to do that. Crap.
the firearm used or the type or even how it was required.
Hope I kept it.
As much as
Oh,
it is,
okay.
see when we look at crime in our communities, when we look at the societal decline, we are in decline as a nation when it comes to the moral and societal decline in our nation. There's no doubt about it.
So quit contributing to it. If you notice it and you're part of it, then change. Quit doing the same thing over and over again. Quit preaching and then doing the opposite.
Reports that the most reliable indicator of violent crime in a community is the proportion of fatherless.
Oh, okay, now we're gonna go to the fatherless? That's what it is? It's not that. Oh my fuck. You guys, I seriously. I'm trying to.
Finds that the U.S. has the world's highest rate of children living in single-parent.
I can't even believe what I'm hearing right now, you guys.
National fatherhood.
I really can't. I am so angry right now.
Data and it's
I've been really mad in my life before, but the more I see the world for what it is and what it's becoming, I see more of why the dead cry out for.
Our government has subsidized even and promoted.
Oh, what is it? You know what? I'm gonna look that up right now.
And we have to do what
That's bothering me. That I can't remember it.
I would just like to give whatever time remains elsewhere to
Shit!
address the.
I'm being attacked.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, is now recognized.
Damn.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
What?
Gun
That's not right.
manufacturers didn't always market weapons of war to civilians, and until recently, trade shows
All right, you know what?
military-style guns available to
I'll have to look at.
Now, gun makers aggressively market AR-15 style.
I have a phone in front of me, gutter guppies. I'm dumb.
Military and law enforcement weapons.
I'm looking it up right now.
America's largest gun manufacturer even developed a name for this marketing ploy, calling it the, quote, halo effect. Now, I want to draw your attention to the screen. Mr. Suplina, I want to ask you about one advertisement that I find troubling, this one. This is an ad for a Daniel Defense MK-18, a high-speed military-style AR.
Revelation 6:10. They called out. I think this is it. They called out in a loud voice. How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of earth and avenge our blood?
made in this advertisement are appropriate.
How
for
long,
civilians.
sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?
That it's favored by special forces. I would like to
That's
ask
what the
Daniel
dead are
Defense
crying
why the
out
same
now.
style of guns being used
That's
in
what these
war zones
children are
market
crying
for
out.
everyday people. It is
This is marking the true end times, you guys. Whether it happens in our lifetime or not, just know it's any day.
First-person shooter video games in its advertising materials to attract adolescents and young adults. Smith & Wesson's M&P 15 .223 caliber rifle was used in the Parkland massacre. Mr. Suplina, what level of culpability should gun manufacturers have when they market human killing machines to a civilian customer base?
Again, this is now unfortunately increasingly the norm among gun manufacturers to market video game style ads. Daniel Defense itself referenced popular video games in its advertising.
It's not the video games.
And they should be.
It's true.
Thank you. Commissioner Gramaglia, I'd like to turn to you next. I want to put another advertisement on the screen.
I'm so mad right now. I want to take another hit, but I'm like, I'm pretty high right now.
15. Is that the same gun that was used in the mass shooting at the top super?
Maybe after I beat the queen.
This advertisement shows a soldier with a Bushmaster, and it states, quote, versatility on the range or during patrol. Your officers were actually on patrol that day, and many of them responded to the active shooter scene with far less advanced weaponry. How do you prepare officers to protect themselves and the public from military-grade killing machines? Oh, it's a trap! With reference that, no problem, that they had adequate weapons to be able to defend themselves. But is that the case?
Those weapons, no, we have active shooter vests that we have in our patrol cars. We can't wear them on a regular basis. They're far too heavy.
Although that bitch lied. Okay, I take that back. I forgive me, gutter guppies, for calling her that. I should not have said that about her. I was wrong. That lady that lied under oath had some correct points that I agreed with. I really do agree. Bump stocks and all that other shit is not going to solve the problem. I agree.
Students now prep for the time that they have in school in the event that they are facing an active shooter and that they may bleed to death from gunshot wounds. What kind of dramatic effect does normalizing gun violence do these reactive measures have on students?
We have seen over the years an increase in anxiety, an increase in the number of students who are seeking additional assistance from our mental health professionals. We are seeing an increase in the amount of students who are coming to our schools with all kinds of social and emotional learning gaps because they have been subjected to overly aggressive drills and looking at social media and TV and seeing other students suffer and die at the hands of gun violence.
Marketing mass killing machines to a civilian customer base by using imagery and words that suggest that that's the purpose of their product is gross and immoral, but it's just what gun companies do now in order to profit from a market beyond their older male customer base. The Second Amendment does not absolve gun manufacturers of their responsibility to market their products responsibly, and children should not be doing fundraisers to stop the bleed kits, instead of making sure that they can have a fun prom, doing car washes, having bake sales, to make sure that their life on campus as students is improved.
Yeah, no fucking kidding.
Campus doesn't end, and they have to use a stop the bleed kit that they've raised money.
The gentlelady's time has expired. As previously was stated at the beginning of the hearing, Mayor Adams has a hard stop at 1:30. Mayor Adams, thank you so much for joining us here today and for your testimony and for your service. You are excused. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Biggs is now recognized. Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last week I thought I'd heard it all when one of the Democrats threatened to end the filibuster, wanted to pack the Supreme Court,
and said that they would confiscate guns. In order to do that, they would
More lies. More lies. More fear mongering.
escalate the Supreme Court as well. I thought that was interesting. It was pretty bad. But then we have here someone actually accusing a witness and actually taking out of context a witness who testified previously and accusing her of perjury. Following that, though, but I got to tell you, the most egregious.
If he was so worried about it, why isn't he letting her talk? Why isn't he truly letting her talk?
A young person, little Mia, who was traumatized 2 weeks ago.
You can tell that he's so shaken by it.
She testified in that video.
You can tell. Look at his eyes. He's so concerned. He's probably coked up. What do you Gutter Guppies think? Type a 1 in the chat if you think Mr. Biggs is coked up. Do you think he's the one that invited the Cawthorn to the sex-fueled coke parties?
Take an 11-year-old child.
Huh.
Graphically described how
He seems like it.
a classmate's blood upon her and feigned her.
He's so fake, so not there. His eyes are so glazed over. He's so fake.
The agony of that little child. For what? For your own political gain, your own political purpose. That is despicable. And over the course of more than 9 hours last week,
He's still not letting her speak. You know why? Because he knows she's a fucking liar. He's like, bitch, here's the... not me. He's like, bitch, here's the bus. Boom! Run her over and over and over again. You fucked up. You fucked up.
And, again, promoted in the Philippines.
They what? Wait.
Confiscating guns from law-abiding citizens. And they gave their entire game away by making clear that neither Congress nor the Supreme Court stand in the way of their radical mission.
We're so worried about her...
To the problem of violent crime in this
Her...
country, make felons
Oh, you dick. Oh, shit.
Felons of law-abiding citizens who own firearms in homes with children. To make felons of law-abiding citizens who own or purchase magazines that hold more than...
Oh, wow. Okay, this could hurt.
The most common firearm in this country sells 15 rounds of magazines.
Oh, well...
Most solutions are to force law enforcement officers to ignore due process and to strip law-abiding citizens of the means...
No, these are all lies. This is all fear-mongering. None of it's true.
On America's Second Amendment rights. Ms. Swearer, before you answer the most pertinent question I think that we're going to hear from you in a second, I want you to tell me, can you define defensive use?
I'm not going to ask you to defend yourself. I'm going to...
It would be a use of a firearm that is to defend oneself.
She's nervous as hell. She's like, I got caught lying under oath. They're not even trying to help me out. She's like a deer in headlights. Look at her. She's trying so hard not to focus on this. Damn, you fucked up, girl. Oh. Like, I know we all want to get mad at her for her lies and stuff like that, but it's all come out. The truth has come out. And look how scared she is. Oh, here we go. He's been watching that clock. He's like, I'm not going to give her much time. I'll give her a little bit.
Congressman, respectfully, I appreciate the opportunity, but we've wasted enough time on political things today, and I'd like to get back to the merits of actually talking about solutions.
You're not going to address it. You've been told that you were a liar. You've been given an opportunity to defend yourself, and you've got no defense because it's true. You lied. Oh, shit. Hopefully I get through this. Yeah, I will.
I also submit a 2019 study by John Lott of the Crime Research Prevention Center. His study examines data on the rate of shootings and accidents in schools that allow students to carry firearms, which found 0 cases of someone being wounded or killed from a shooting, let alone public national in a school that allows students to carry firearms. And thirdly, an article by the Washington
Just a matter of time before you arm a teacher and either she kills an innocent student or the police kill I say her, but a teacher kills an innocent student or a cop kills an innocent teacher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this hearing, and I'd like to thank the witnesses, particularly those on the first panel, for their testimony. I was very moved by what each of them had to say. Americans have grown weary, frustrated, and frightened by the ever-intensifying cascade of gun violence afflicting our country. And they are sick and tired of their elected leaders continuing to do nothing to address the carnage. The fact of the matter is that the gun lobby, led by the NRA and gun manufacturers that fund it, exert great influence on politicians to support its policy, which is that
We've seen it here today with one of our witnesses.
is a good guy with a gun. You know, I mean, if that holds true, then, you know,
Uvalde wouldn't have happened.
it just doesn't make sense in a civilized society, and I submit to you that every person with a gun makes us unsafe as opposed to
It's true. If everybody had a hand grenade, does it make everybody safer? If tricycles came with guns, would we all be safe? One of my favorite quotes.
Dealers to flood our streets with weapons that are more powerful than what was available last week. That policy, Madam Chair, has been a deadly failure. And if we continue the unbridled flow of firearms flooding our nation's streets, we will continue to see rising rates of gun violence in America. No other country has a problem like the gun violence problem plaguing our country. And policymakers who stand in the way of doing something to address the problem should be ashamed of themselves, and they need to be voted out of office and replaced with leaders who are willing to stand up to the NRA and pass common sense gun reform laws. It's common sense to impose a ban on the manufacture and sale to the public of military assault weapons meant for use on the battlefield. It's common sense to mandate universal background checks by closing the gun show loophole. And it's common sense to raise the age to purchase all firearms from 18 to 21. But for some reason, my colleagues insist on doing nothing to reverse
It's true.
is a tide of a failed policy.
They want to do absolutely nothing for anything. If they can just bring the government to a halt, stop it from working, get the people to feel like the government doesn't work, then they will get behind one person that stands and looks strong, and they'll follow him or her, them, they, whatever.
19 children and two teachers killed in Uvalde. The 10 shoppers killed in Buffalo, New York. What about their right to live? What about the right to live of the almost countless others who've died from street gun violence? How much more blood should be shed before we in Congress take action? Madam Chair, the House has acted to pass laws on universal background checks, but our legislation is stalled in the Senate because of the filibuster. And Congress today will pass common sense gun legislation. I should say Democrats in Congress will pass common sense gun law.
Unfortunately, it's true.
And pass it on to the Senate where it will be met with the filibuster. The overwhelming majority of Americans support the types of common sense gun safety reforms under consideration this week. And failure to act is unconscionable. Failure is an insult to the countless dead children and shattered families and communities.
Again, nothing is being done today.
We are here to represent, and I join my colleagues in their fervent thoughts and prayers and beg my colleagues to match their thoughts and prayers with equally fervent action.
That's impossible because they don't believe what they say.
Police noted that when the Biden assault weapons ban was in place between 1994 and 2004, the number of assault weapons traced to crimes fell by a dramatic 66%. Since assault weapons are often used against police officers and the IACP is supportive of the assault weapons ban or the assault rifle ban, what message does it send when Republicans who loudly proclaim their support for law enforcement refuse to even discuss banning assault weapons?
You know, my issue here is that we need to reduce the amount of bloodshed on our streets, and the damage that these weapons cause will lead to more bloodshed on the streets. It's more victims that are being struck, and it's something that needs to be done.
Thank you, I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Madam Chair, also thank you for the indulgence over the vote. Heard a lot today. I don't want to give too much speechifying or do that too often here. Just where it's been referenced a lot today, actually, about the need for universal background checks and closing the quote-unquote gun show loophole. Can you actually explain in detail what that policy actually is?
Sure. So universal background checks start with this general conception of what would be at its core legitimate. Right now, most gun sales, whether it's brick and mortar gun stores, whether it's bought over the internet, anything that occurs in the first state.
No, it's like you can't believe anything she says. She's been proven to be a liar, so unless he's just trying to get her to hang herself.
Access to the NICS system. It cannot, like FFLs, call up the FBI and take the background. Now, could that theoretically be a way that an interstate sale for individuals who are otherwise related to it? Sure. As I point out, the problem
We have pawn shop laws.
is that this is a low reward venture. This is already not how most criminals are obtaining firearms. They are already through the black market, through informal channels that are not in any way, shape, or form addressed by interstate private sales. And on top of that, things like HRA would criminalize a whole host of responsible, temporary, low-risk transfers of law-abiding citizens. Like if your buddy wants to borrow your hunting rifle, or you're going on a month-long trip to Europe and you want your guns to be secured in your friend's safe next door, you have to go through a background check, legally transfer title of your guns to that individual, and then legally transfer title back to your
Who's doing that?
That's the problem.
Who's doing that? Who goes on vacation and is like, hey, I want my neighbor to hold all my guns. Let me transport them all over to my friend's house.
The shooter in Parkland acquiring his weapon.
It would not have stopped with perhaps
What the fuck are you talking about? These people are so full of shit.
capable of passing background checks.
Holy hell.
The shooter in Sandy Hook, the Newtown shooter. Did that shooter kill his mother and take the guns?
Yes, he did. And I think, I forget his age, but he otherwise did not have a disqualifying history.
The shooter in Uvalde, did he actually shoot his grandmother in the face before he went to perpetrate the crimes in Uvalde?
To my knowledge, yes.
Folks, here's one of the things that we've seen through all these mass shootings. I was a member of the state legislature during the Parkland shooting, so I was in the legislature during that time.
And you did nothing.
Mass shooters that target our schools.
No, one thing is clear is you did absolutely nothing. And you've done nothing for healthcare. You don't want to spend money on healthcare. If it means you have to spend out of your pocket, you don't want to do it. All of a sudden it's socialism and it's evil and it's not right.
The perpetrator shot his grandmother in the face. That is insane.
No, it's not insane. He probably had a vendetta against her. How many people get upset and...
Are we not going to say that a 19-year-old who is a legal adult in the United
People kill each other because they're angry. Like, this guy acts like, oh my god, nobody gets angry and hurts somebody. Why would you do that? Why would you hurt someone? This is really the argument the Republicans have, is we need more thoughts and prayers. We just need to be nicer to one another, and everyone that's ever killed anyone with a gun is just wacko, and there's no explanation for it, so there's nothing we can do.
2 of them are school age now.
Yeah, and where does his kids go, huh? I guarantee you his kids don't go to no regular school. They probably go to a public or a private school.
Have a responsibility as a legislator to actually defend the Constitution of the United
You're not
States.
defending the Constitution. You're blatantly lying to the American people, just like she did. And that's why you should be held accountable just like she should.
20 years. The one constant.
All of our politicians should be held accountable for their words and actions. When they lie, they should be held accountable for it.
And the vast majority of people who are in their age would not even think.
But now, so now they're going from video games and violent movies to, it's just, they're crazy. It's just crazy people.
Psychopaths. We only pass laws in order to maintain the actual legal momentum of freedom in the United States. The Second Amendment is not there to stop psychopaths, to be perfectly honest with you. It is not. That's not its purpose.
So why are you...
The Second Amendment is clear. It is to protect the constitutional rights of American citizens.
Oh yeah, he didn't live to that.
I hope the next one will be more
Oh, you can
useful.
tell by the look in his eyes too that they're so awful. He's so worried about his kids. He's so worried. Oh. He doesn't care. He doesn't give two shits.
Votes have been called to allow members to vote. The committee will stand in recess until the end of the first vote series. The committee stands in recess.
All right. Well, that was a perfect timing, Gutter Guppies. We're gonna end the stream here. We'll be on later today, maybe, for some GoldenEye. Oh, I'm trying to get out of here. Oh, yeah, I forgot. It's been a while since I've played this, mainly because when you play this on Twitch, you can have the audience vote with you, but since I'm banned on Twitch for speaking out against things like this, I had to come over here to YouTube. Unfortunately, the parental or the age blocker or whatever, I guess, doesn't mean jack shit on Twitch. So yeah, I don't know who over there silenced me or whatever, but apparently being anti school shootings is an issue. Oh, she's mad. Look at her. She's mad. Well, you know what? You had a chance to defend yourself. Get mad all you want. That was your own words. Your own words, lady. Your own words used against you. See, that's the problem is nowadays you can't just lie and just expect people to believe you. Nowadays, you're held accountable with your word. Well, I mean, you're not really held accountable, but people can look at your past information and what you've said. And truly, yeah, I got angry during the Uvalde shooting. And I said a lot of things. I don't know, I'd have to go back and hear what I said because I was pretty hot. All I know is I was silenced for that one thing. And it was that one stream. I was silenced that one stream because I was speaking out against this. Again, it's not about violence. It's not about being violent. I would also say, though, if the tables turned and done something in that quote-unquote gun-free zone, I guarantee you fucking assault weapons would be banned like that. Unfortunately, there's too many people that aren't at risk because they have so much money they don't feel like they are one of us. They don't feel like they feel like they're above us. This is peasant problems. This is the lower people, the hoodlums. The people in the ghettos, it's their problems. Nah, motherfucker, this has been going on for years. Shootings happened in the 60s and 70s, too, at schools. It wasn't as prevalent. Back then, it was mainly in black schools, and it was, oh, well, it's not a white problem. It's a black issue. We don't need to worry about it. Just like Eminem said, you know, now that it happens in a white neighborhood, now all of a sudden people care. I'm just gonna leave you gutter guppies with that. You guys stay smoky out there. Stay positive. This too shall pass. This is also what do you call it? Just another season. And eventually this too will pass. Yeah. But anyway, stay smoky out there. Stay positive. We'll see you later.